Coming up next, The Crunch with Cam Slater. Conversations with a side of controversy. Every Thursday from 4 p.m, right here on RCR, Reality Check Radio.
People are struggling to have conversations and connect with others that they don't completely agree with on every topic. And I think that's probably the biggest problem that we need to try and solve, is how after all this division and after all this separation do we end up bringing people together again, and what does unity really look like?
New Zealand faces some pretty big issues. First one is COVID and the aftermath. There's no getting away from that. Second is racial division. It's been ginned up and it's dangerous. Another issue that maybe people haven't got their head around yet is digital currency. What form does that take? Is it programmable? Will it be used to manipulate behaviour and patterns of behaviour? Those questions need to be asked and answered.
How can you have fair, open, democratic government by people who are appointed? It's a ridiculous idea. And if that idea is taken to its zenith, then this country is in real trouble, because democracy, one person, one vote, where every vote is of equal value, has got to be the foundation of a modern New Zealand.
What's true, what's not true, how our kids are to be educated. And, I have a great fear for the future. I think we know from history where this could end up.
This is The Crunch with Cam Slater. Conversations with a side of controversy, right here on RCR.
Welcome to The Crunch on Reality Check Radio. I'm your host, Cam Slater, and this is the place we crunch the political issues and cut through the politicians' spin. It's crunch time. The election is over, and now we await the counting of the special votes, which make up around 20% of the vote. The numbers can and will change. November 3 is the day we find out. We have an interesting show ahead for you this week. My first guest this afternoon is Matt McCartan, where we'll dissect the various campaigns, all from the perspective of an old-school political campaigner. And then I'll be talking with Rachel Stewart on her take on the results of the election. Now, I enjoyed talking to her on Breakfast last week, so I thought I'd get her back on my show for some more brutal home truths. We'll dip into the mailbag, of course, and then it'll be time for a chat with my buddies to find out their thoughts on the election results. It's now clear that we voted for change, the tyrants have been slain, and now we can look forward to healing this broken nation. Don't forget to send comments to inbox@realitycheck.radio or text to 2057. It's traditionally thought that New Zealand has a 3-year term for governments, and while strictly true, in reality it isn't. Matt McCartan's the guy who explained to me that our real term of Parliament is actually 6 years, split into 2 3-year halves. If your government is good in the first half, then the voters give you another 3 years to play on the field. You get a second half. But if things are looking a bit dodgy or they really can't support you playing anymore, the government gets booted from office. And it's rare for one-term governments. Labour has had 2 in 1957 under Walter Nash and in 1972 under Norman Kirk. Kirk died and was replaced by Bill Rowling, but they only had a one-term government. They've also had 2 goes at a 2-term government in 1984 to 1990 under David Lange, Geoffrey Palmer and Mike Moore, and now in 2017 to 2023 under Jacinda Ardern and Chris Hipkins. National has never had a single-term government and never a 2-term government. They've mostly had 3-term governments and once a 4-term government. Since World War II, they've had 5 full games and also got a first half in the second game, with the sole exception of being 2 full games completed when led by Keith Holyoake. If politics is a game of 2 halves, Labour has completed just 3 full games of 2 halves. two where they didn't get to play a second game, and only under Helen Clark did they get a third half. Now, based on my analogy of games, it's clear voters trust National-led governments far more than Labour-led governments. And since World War II, National has governed for 48 of the 78 years, and Labour just 30 years. It really is a game of two halves. And so now we start a new game. The election was an emphatic vote for change. Voters chose the centre-right, with the three parties making up that bloc scoring 54.39% of the vote, while the parties of the woke, racist and communist persuasion scored just 40.28%. The divisive nature of the Ardern-Hipkins regime has been comprehensively rejected by the voters of New Zealand. Labour's electoral support plummeted from 50% in 2020 to around 27% in 2023, which has led to terms like bloodbath and historic defeat. Analysts point to several factors contributing to this setback. Firstly, by neglecting working class roots. Labour is accused of losing touch with its working class base, as it's increasingly led by the middle class, neglecting key issues for traditional supporters. Chris Trotter has a brilliant article on this. Secondly, with an economic disconnect inside the party. The party's inability to address economic concerns and a perceived cost of living crisis left voters deeply disillusioned. Thirdly, the divisive nature of their racist co-governance focus. Now, some argue that Labour's shift towards co-governance and decolonisation agendas diverted attention from economic and working class issues and alienated large sections of the population. And finally, their appalling COVID response and broken promises. Plenty of critics blame Labour for mishandling the COVID response, vaccine rollouts, and failing to deliver on key promises. And that last point being the most catastrophic. Not a single one of their flagship policies in the 2017 election were even remotely close to being achieved. They couldn't build a house even if you sat them in a room full of Lego. And not a single millimetre of track has been laid to Mount Roskill, nor even to the airport. Child poverty is still with us, despite claims they've lifted thousands out of poverty. If you dare go ask the parents of those saved children, I think you'd find that they think they're still living in poverty. And if they think they're still living in poverty, they are. The view across the electorates in this election was devastating for Labour. There are only two times they have lost Mount Roskill. The first was after the ravages of the Longy Douglas era, and the second was in this election. That's how bad this election has been for Labour. They've burned 50% of their electorates. And in the wake of this devastating loss, Labour now has to grapple with the existential question, what is the point of Labour in the 2020s? Meanwhile, we must await the results of the special votes. The final positions of all the parties will change. Special votes represent 20% of the vote, and it's rather presumptuous of National and ACT to think it won't change. I fully expect both of those parties to lose a seat, and then they will need New Zealand First, and that's a good thing, because after interviewing Winston Peters on election night, I was left with the impression that there are some unfinished business with him and retribution on Labour. Even better is his resolve to have the independent inquiry into COVID.
We could have a proper inquiry within a year, finish it off, and respond to the people who have been, in our view, misled, maltreated, and who deserve to be considered in the considerations going forward. So we're going to press on with that no matter what happens tonight.
But imagine how more powerful his position would have been had those freedom voters who fell for the spin and misdirection, the hopium, and the folly of those minnow parties had voted New Zealand First. Instead of 8 MPs, they could have had 12 and 3 more freedom candidates in the House. It was a lost opportunity. Voting your conscience will likely hand seats to Labour and National. And I bet that wasn't your intention. You've had your protest vote and no one noticed. Well done. But for now, we let the democratic processes continue, and we will discuss developments as they come up. Because like Rust, politics never sleeps. And we here at The Crunch and at Reality Check Radio are here to inform you and hold the politicians to account. But celebrate. Together, we helped get rid of the worst government in living memory. Good riddance to them.
Want an easier way to listen to RCR? Well, you can now download the brand new Reality Check Radio app, both on iOS and Android. We've completed our beta testing, and the app is now live. You can visit the app stores direct or find out all you need to know at www.realitycheck.radio/app. That's at realitycheck.radio/app. Our test bunnies have been hard at play to ensure you have access to everything, from listening to our live broadcast, downloading some of our incredible interviews, and checking out the latest blogs, all from the very same app. So get listening and download the RCR app now.
Matt McCartan and I have both been political opponents and good friends for a very long time. We both understand you need back channels to bypass the public side of politics, and it is in those back channels where brutal honesty is required from both sides in order to get consensus. He's on the line to discuss the results of the election with me now. Welcome to The Crunch, Matt McCartan.
Good afternoon to you, Robert.
It's a bit of a bath for the left on Saturday night.
A bit of a bath.
Yeah, a bit of a bath. Probably a bucket of cold water as well.
Yeah, I think the word I was searching for on election night was bloodbath. You know, a Saturday massacre. You know, the red wedding. You know, or funeral. So no, it was in one sense it was what happens in elections. Everyone gets hopeful, and they don't look at the numbers anymore. So I went into a bit of a sweepstake, and I'm disappointed to say that I was eerily accurate, because people like you and I, we don't get emotional when we're looking at polls, because I'm someone who believes polls.
Yeah. Always believe the polls.
Yeah, that's what I always think, and then because, it's not emotional. Okay, And what do people do? They compare polls with other polls, but as you know, you compare polls with the previous poll from the same pollster. That's the key. What's the trend? So that was pretty good. So it was this is a Labour Party, which was, didn't have an election for a year ago. We had a coronation,
Yes. Yeah.
And it was a big thank you to Jacinda for saving the country. And of course, it didn't help that the National Party was still as rhythm. So, but this election wasn't so much, in my view, is that National didn't win it, Labour lost it.
No, that's always the way, though. Incumbents always lose.
As you know. But I think incredibly, this is, how do you lose half of your caucus? And you've got to be, almost half of the caucus, but I'll say half, go from 50% record to kind of 28% as we speak. So that's an extraordinary loss. And I'm not sure that they even understand why they lost, And of course, it didn't all go to National. I mean, National got its provincial vote back, as you know. So they got provincial. Well, it wasn't a Labour's vote anyway, right? Just not loads. And so that was always going to go back. But what happened is National didn't pick up, the votes that went from Labour, Labour's votes.
No, they went everywhere.
I know.
Talking to David Farrer, he was saying they were going everywhere. It was literally anyone but Labour election.
Exactly. So that's what happened there, right? So National, they were the recipients of Labour's demise, but they don't come with a strong mandate. But, I was watching Chris Hipkins when he's doing his concessory speech, and I thought, someone has told him that he lost the election, and it's kind of, whereas what, as you know, and everyone who's listening, say, you get up and say, I want to thank, I want to congratulate Christopher Luxon, the new Prime Minister. I want to say, I want to thank, acknowledge Winston Peters' huge victory tonight. Who would have thought, kind words, the Greens won 3 seats That's a huge thing for them. You know, the Māori Party. That's a momental change, and these are permanent changes. And I want to acknowledge, and then I want to acknowledge the people of New Zealand and my party. And then, you know, as Mike Moore says, you know, the people are always right. And it just needed to be that kind of reflection, you know, just saying, we've got a message, we've got the message. We will have to now, you know, understand what that message was, and we're going to have, you know, blah, blah, you know, but there was all that, we've done this and we've done that, and we said, what? You know, so that...
Yeah, I mean, you know, he was sitting there talking about how they've built 13,000 houses, and I was sitting there thinking to myself, hang on a minute, you promised us 100,000. That's a little bit short.
I wasn't going to be mean, but yes, exactly right. And of course, when you raise that 13,000 homes, and you think, so after 6 years, since 8 years ago when you made that pop policy, you've got that. If that was in the business world, you would have sacked your CEO, right?
Well, we did, didn't we?
Well, indeed. Sorry, you've got him. Yes, you did.
Yeah, I mean, we did sack him, but I thought too that Christopher Luxon was rather presumptuous in his victory speech.
Yes, he was. Because you and I know in politics you've got to learn to count.
Yeah.
And what they were doing is they were at primary school counting, not where they need to be. And you know, special votes are 20%. They've always leaned towards the left as a thing, and then Māori particularly because of the strung out nature with rental accommodation. People move around a lot. They move from electorate to electorate, et cetera, right? Always a big. Last election, those votes went to Māori and brought that extra seat through. The Greens always do well because the young people sort of moving around, the students. And National doesn't do so well, and that's partly because its voter base is stable. You know, so there's not so many special votes. So I just did the thing, you know, sort of had a joke to people on the night when they came in, a group were watching the TV, and they said, oh my God, it's a national government. And there's Winston smiling away there, and I thought, hold my beer, says Winston.
Yeah. Well, I was sitting with Winston after he came back from delivering his speech to the faithful in Russell. And I was sitting there watching him, and there was a few glum people around, and he had this big beaming smile on his face, and he was sitting there and said, Luxon and Seymour are going to have to get the calculators out shortly. And I said, oh, what do you mean? He said, well, you just watch. He's just made his speech. He said he's got victory. His numbers are looking like about just a bit shy of 41%. Mm-hmm. Said by the end of tonight they'll be in the 38s. You watch, and sure enough, and that's the benefit of experience and longevity to know how it goes. And
well, so he did on his little ad when he got on his horse.
Yeah,
he said, "Not my first rodeo," right?
That's right.
His first rodeo, but not Winston. You know?
No. That's right. And, you know, I actually teased him a bit that night. I said to him, you know, Winston's a bit disappointed with that ad, and he put on his little grumpy voice, and he said, well, I thought it was good. And I said, yeah, but, mate, I was expecting you to, you know, be like Zorro at the end and sort of draw a sword and rear the horse up on its back legs. And he said, oh, you're never satisfied, are you, Cam? I said, no, mate, I'm not. But that would have been fantastic if you'd done that.
And he would have killed himself.
Yeah, exactly.
I think just getting on the horse said it all, you know. And I thought that's got to be the best political ad of this campaign, but maybe it's up there amongst the top. So I thought, see, that's that message of experience.
Yeah, and you know, the funny thing was on all of the TV news thing when they were talking about Winston Peters, in the background behind the presenters was always the horse ad playing, you know, every time. It was an inspired choice, and he says it was his choice too. He chose to do that.
Well, the lead always has the credit, right? So, so we'll accept that. But look, it's a great ad, and it's outstanding. There's not many ads that I'm impressed by, but that was impressive. So, kudos to him. Look, as we know, right? this is the guy, right? What? That he came back, and the media, God love them, but some of them just don't know anything. They're just giving him a hard time. And I'm just watching him. So he's done something that, well, when he came back last time, right? And you know, for those of the viewers, the class act, and I'm not a New Zealand First supporter, right? But I understand class when I see it. When he got tossed out the Parliament, out for 3 years, came back against all the odds. We rode off because we're used to the convention. People out, he's gone. Comes back in, first speech in the House. Before I was rudely interrupted, he says, and carries on, right? And what can you say now? This is like the second time he's come back from nowhere. Who does that?
Well, a guy who knows politics, intimately. And, everyone's been talking. Imagine how David Seymour feels right now, right? The entire campaign he has run has been slagging off Winston Peters, saying he doesn't trust him, saying that he won't work with him, saying that he won't do this and won't do that, and actually issuing veiled threats to the National Party that if he doesn't get his way, he's going to throw a paddy and stomp his feet and, do whatever. He must feel very, very small right now and thinking back on all those things that he said about Winston Peters, because I'll tell you right now, when those special votes come in, National and ACT are going to have to call Winston Peters to form a government.
Oh, there's no question. Just a question of how many, right? I mean, if we National is so close to losing the seat now anyway. So
0.2%. If the vote changes by 0.2% negatively for them, they lose a seat.
Right, and I knew they're right on the edge, so that's absolutely right. So, and they could lose 2, right? But let's just even 1.
Yeah.
If ironically, as you would know, right, is that Kelvin's seat, Kelvin Davis' seat in the north, Tai Takarau, is that's also very, very on special votes if you compare it to the last election, right? It's a whisker.
Yeah.
And ironically, if the Māori Party picks up that seat, it's better for the left, right? Because Kelvin gets back into Parliament, he's on the list, and of course it's an overhang for the Māori Party to keep the overhang. So, it's a double whammy. So you've got to sort of think that if the National Party loses 1 seat, they're in trouble. 2 seats, it's over. Ring, ring. Winston.
Yeah.
Always respected you, mate. Always respected you, David who? David Seymour? No, don't know who he is, yeah. So.
I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? There was a rumour going around that National was considering offering the Speaker's position to Winston Peters. And as soon as I heard that, I thought, well, they must have rocks in their heads.
They've never understood Winston. They've never.
I would imagine there was a few frantic phone calls between the backroom operators saying, pull your head in, guys, this isn't going to work.
And
he's got far too much experience and other things. But if you look at the campaigns of all the campaigns, let's start with the positive, right? For my objective view or unobjective view, biased view, I think there was 2 campaigns that did really, really well.
Okay.
And 1 pretend campaign that they think they did well, but they don't realise that it wasn't them. So the 2 that I think that did really, really well were New Zealand First, obviously, for coming back.
Absolutely.
And the Maori Party, or Te Pāti Maori, for actually understanding their constituency and who their actual voters were.
Absolutely.
And going and ripping those seats off the Labour Party, who were adamant they were going to retain them. Now, I think they might pick up 2 more. I think they might pick up Te Takarau, but they might even pick up another one. And if they get 2, then that phone call is definitely going to Winston Peters. But those are the 2 campaigns that I think were brilliant for them.
Look, okay, let me talk about the Māori Party campaign because I had some knowledge of it. It's transformative for them, right?
Yeah.
They had change because when they formed the Māori Party, when it was formed, right, it was formed by a generation which is different from who they are now.
Yeah.
You know, conservative, cautious, you know, and it wasn't about core issues of class, you know, of the poor, the working, the people from struggle street. It was the idea of Māori sovereignty and Māori support. And by going with national, right, that's not their base. So therefore, it was always, and as you would know, right, from a strategic point of view, electorally, it was a very clever move by Key because it adds votes. It's not competing for each other's votes. So you're getting an
yeah.
With and then of course they all got tossed out because that was going to happen because even this time round, the party vote in all the Māori seats went to Labour.
Yep.
You know? But the Māori Party for the first time was very close, and that's the first. And the only reason they didn't win the other two seats sort of in the north because the Green Party ran electorate candidates in those two seats. They didn't run at the other, so they split the vote and allowed. But you're quite right, on the specials, they could get both seats. They could get as close in Tamaki Makaurau in Auckland and very, very close as rate raises in the north. So and of course, the irony of that would be they won 6 seats and the only seat they didn't win was a seat that a Labour Party MP, Neka Waidevi, had jumped ship and went to the Māori Party and then lost the seat to a young Māori woman. And I thought, well, does that send a message or what? Look, it's just outstanding. And I think that the Māori Party, you know, and as you know, that John Tamihere being the president, very strategic. Let's say about John, he understands messaging, and he got them to really focus on the core issues: cost of living, housing, you know, the wealth tax, etc., which Labor ran away from, which is interesting. And we know what that happened. So I agree with it. And the Māori Party is home and it's base now, right? They will pick up all 7 seats, in my view, the next election. If they don't win, you know, they'll win. They're like the best they're going to land up with 6. But if they get the 6, even 5, they'll pick up the rest of the seats, and they're permanent. It's a permanent political force. And New Zealand first, well, what can you say? You know, it's Lazarus from the dead. And, you know, I've taken the view that Winston's been dead for 10 years, but it doesn't matter, you know. They still vote for Winston no matter what. I'm joking. But the Greens is, you know, I think you're alluding to, right?
Yeah.
They've come of age in the sense of, this is my take on it, right, that Labor lost the urban Liberal, you know, which is it's trauma for Labor, right, because that's who runs their party. It's the Liberal left.
That's right.
And they've lost their core seats. So before you see it, just Chloe, you know, so that was an accident, a bit like when Sandra Lee won Auckland Central for the Lions, you know, it's an aberration. You know, it'll come back. So in Chloe, you know, hold on, second time round, and got it. And Greens ran really well in Mount Albert. You know, it may well have tipped the Labor candidate out, may well, with Helen White. But Rongotai, I thought they had I thought the Greens would win Wellington Central, but Rongotai, really? So that's permanent. I think, and you may not agree, and your viewers may not, but I think this is good for the Green Party in the obvious thing, but I think it changes the nature of the Green Party. Those 3 MPs are interested in keeping their seats.
How long is James Shaw going to stay as leader, though, now?
Oh, it doesn't matter. Because, I mean, I think James has been good for them, I do.
Well, he's the sane voice of the Green Party.
Yeah, no. Well, I'll reinforce this. The fact is they've got 3 seats, general seats, because you're disciplined on not being crazy, because you lose your seats. See, that's what I meant, is that the days of the hippies being able to kind of call, I don't mean to disrespect, I'm being dismissive, but, you know, the ill discipline, I think, is going to go because you've got 3 MPs there going, no, we're not doing that.
Yeah,
you know? I think that's going to change the power relationships within the Greens. So I think, you know, the minor parties, or the third parties, I should say, not the minor, all of them had a great night at the expense of Labor.
Yeah. I mean, Labor had a dreadful campaign. I mean, it was entirely negative, despite Chris Hipkins trying to tell us it wasn't. I mean, talk about gaslighting the audience in the last debate, you know, telling everybody that we've been having a positive campaign. You know, they had It was rubbish. They had nothing positive to say because they've got nothing positive that they can hang their hat on. I mean, none of their flagship policies and announcements from 2017 came even remotely close to being delivered.
Yeah.
They're huge. And then they had massive announcements on extra things like another harbour crossing with Michael Wood and, that we're going to do this by this date and that by that. Nothing ever happened. And so they had nothing left other than to actually channel the nasty party. And, negative campaigns don't work in New Zealand. I mean, I think the only negative campaign that has worked was in 1975 with Rob Muldoon with the Dancing Cossacks.
And that ad ran once.
Yeah, it ran once.
Yeah.
Everybody talked about it. It was highly negative, incredibly negative.
Yes,
but it also made you laugh at the same time because it was a cartoon.
For those who don't know who aren't our age, it was that they're turning the country red, and now come the Cossacks, because in those days that communism was a thing.
Yeah, well, it was a thing, not so much.
Of the past. So I think obviously with Labour, what do you say? When you talk about the negative ads, right, here's a thing I just about wept when I saw it, right? I was out in South Auckland at one point, and on the wall was a poster of Christopher Luxon, and like the Trump sort of gangster with the black and white, the posters around. I thought it was a national ad, and I'm thinking, gee, that's very trendy. Christopher Luxon in a big photo, and there's some words, but who reads words when it's a big poster, right? And I had to go up there, and then I realised no, and then I thought. It didn't say it was a Labour ad, and I was just confused. I sort of said it had, putting don't put them at risk and that. And of course, I made a joke because it had something about, too risk for New Zealand. I can't even remember what the words were, right? So I took a photo, sent it to the Labour team, and I said, if I was mischievous, if I was a Nat and mischievous, I'd graffiti above those words and put Labour is too risky for New Zealand and run it as a Luxon ad. And then make a joke of him. Now, they didn't appreciate the joke, but I said, where in part of Marketing 101, you promote your opponent when you've got limited funds.
You never do it.
And then I drove down the St. Luke's by the St. Luke's, and they had a big electronic board, and I saw Luxon again with, Luxon's name, and I knew then it wasn't one of their ads. But of course, you've got all these words at the bottom, and I'm thinking, this is cars driving by. No one's going to see those words, so they're going to think it's a national ad. I was just astonished.
Well, it's like the ACT Party ones attacking Winston as well. They had a picture of Winston Peters smiling, and they had some words that you could believe that Winston Peters would say. And, it was just bizarre that both the ACT Party and the Labour Party were both attacking New Zealand first.
And yeah, you're right, because New Zealanders are polite.
Yeah, I mean, if you take my experience with New Zealanders in 2014, and what happened then. You were right in the middle of the beast that was busily slaying me at the time. But, politics is politics. But there was news articles saying I was New Zealand's most hated man. And, after the 2014 election, I can only remember one person who ever said anything to me to my face that was negative. And he was in a car and he wound down the window. And as I walked towards him, he drove off, giving me the fingers and shouting at me. But it was only one person. So if I was New Zealand's most hated man, and I didn't experience anybody giving me abuse or anything like that, then, you're right. New Zealanders are polite. They won't be rude to people to their face, but they won't vote for you.
Well, my experience is that people in New Zealand are very polite. I think that's our English DNA. But I think it's a Polynesian thing too. So New Zealanders in politics have always been almost always are very polite, to your face at least.
Yeah, to your face. They might do things on Twitter or Facebook or stuff like that, but when you meet them face to face, they very rarely cut loose on you. And that's what I've experienced.
Yeah, well, New Zealanders are very passive aggressive in politics. I think that's right.
Yeah, this is where we see the media are kind of out of sync with the New Zealand public, and it's been shown too. In the lead up to the election, the media were trying to make a race of this at the last minute. In the last week, that things were very close, and it didn't turn out that way. And then, of course, we saw that manifest itself with Damien O'Connor leaving the caucus room and Jenna Lynch getting in his face, and he told her to F off. And, the media ran that in headlines, almost immediately so that we could feel sorry for them. But everybody that I was talking to thought that Damien O'Connor was very restrained.
Look, I agree. I think the media, we deal in the media world, and, they need to be fed each day. We always say, feed the chooks.
Yep.
And they get bored very easily. So in the last week, if it's Labor's going to lose by landslide, possum in the headlight. So, the only question I've got for Hipkins and his team is, so how much do you think you're going to lose by, and how much is all your fault and all the things you've done wrong? But they get bored with that, right? So in the last week, they've got to change the narrative. And Labor, of course, has to do the spin, right? We're closing the gap. They don't say, oh, yeah, we're going to get a real hiding. That's their job. So they're going to be saying to the press, spinning to the press, our signs are, we're coming back, and, we've got a late run and that, because that's what they've got to do. Then the media, because, they have no analysis, a lot of them, they go straight and they just buy it hook, line and sinker. So it builds up the momentum in the last week. So Labor had a job to do, and they did it. The media had a job to do, and they didn't. So therefore it comes as a great shock to everyone on Saturday night, but not to people like you and me. Because the rule of thumb in politics, 101, learn to count.
Yeah, learn to count and use all your fingers and your toes if you need to.
Yeah, and if you're looking at the polls, they were telling all the polls up to in the last week, all told you what the result was going to be.
Yeah, I mean, it was funny because they, Labor released the Talbot Mills poll and said, the surge is on, and that showed them at about 30%, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, the Guardian poll was the best they ever had, which was 30. So my view to them when I was talking to some of them on the Monday, you just see that poll, ignore the rest, And so, look, we're close, there's only 4 points between us, and they've got a job to do, and they went and did it.
Yeah, they went and did it. But
their own polling at 28%, said that, and that's what they got.
Yeah, that's right. And that's the thing with polls. I think people make the mistake of looking at polls individually and not looking at the trend and where the trend was going. And if there's amazing things out there, like I don't know, Wikipedia, where you look at go and look at Wikipedia polling for the 2023 election, and you have a look at the charts that are on that page, and it's obvious that there was going to be a change of government. National was kind of flatlining, but not going down. Labor was on an inexorable slide, and all the minor parties were on the rise. There was going to be a change, and there was nothing that was going to change that.
Well, I think that was clear. I think if anyone who was spinning the fact is that Labor had a chance, they're partisan, right? They're spinning. But right, I find that Wikipedia is actually the best for any polls in any country, because what they do is they compare the same poll with the same poll. What the short-term media attention span, you compare the last poll, which was taken, with the last poll before that. But they're different polling companies with different
methodologies,
different technology, and so you can only look at polls as comparing the same pollsters with their previous polls, and all of them showed the rise, that National was flatlining and the votes were going to the other parties. And once New Zealand First was seen to be a 5% player, then suddenly they were getting votes from all over the place. So, and I did a bit of a survey on Friday night, and not that I'm you and I are geniuses, we know, but I got all the numbers right. But that's just because I looked at the polls. And
that's the thing, isn't it? Because if you look at some of these very minor parties, particularly in the freedom movement, it didn't seem that there was anybody there that was dealing with reality. And, I was copping flack on this station by saying that what they were living on was what I call hopium. It's very, very addictive. but ultimately destructive, because it tricks you into believing something that is never going to occur if you are rational and as cold and calculating as you and I are when it comes to looking at the numbers. And it's the numbers that matter. And there was no way that people like Liz Gunn, who was variously claiming that they could win if they got every vote in Southland, or they could get 2 million votes. It was just fanciful stuff that people clung to without even questioning the leadership of those parties to say, well, hang on a second. And I did this to Matt King. I said to him, Matt, you say you're going to win in Northland. Have you done a poll there to show you're winning? He said, no, I'm just going by the gut feel. And it comes back to that politeness thing. Nobody was prepared to tell Matt King that he was dreaming. Maybe they needed a Daryl Kerrigan to pop up in Northland to tell the truth. But in the end, we had to run a poll, right, to show that he had come fourth. And guess where he came on election night? Exactly where our poll at RCR said he would, fourth.
Well, it's delusion, and also, I think, narcissism at that level. It just is. And what they do, I always tell people when they're candidates, everyone who comes up to you and shake your hand and wish you luck, that's not a vote.
No.
That's just being polite. When people say good luck, that means, go well. It doesn't mean I'm voting for you. And I said, what you got to do is when you're in a crowd, look at the people, how many people are around the walls and not engaging, right? Because what they do is they get a thing is people come up and they talk to a few people and they think the whole group is supporting them, right? Because they want to believe it, right? It's not that they're being misled. They want to be misled because it is just political sort of narcissism. I mean, Liz Gunn, she had great science, and I didn't know anything about her apart from she was a TV reporter once. And I didn't need to know anything more, right? There's someone who just gets this vision in their head that they're amazing. And journalists, of course, are the worst, or a lot of them, because they've been on TV and so they think, they're famous. But all of that lot, and Brian and Tamaki, right? They go to church and they got their followers, their worshippers, say, oh, you're wonderful, you're Jesus, the rep on this world. So, they just believe it because they want to believe it. They go into politics, it comes as a rude shock to them. But no one else.
I said to Brian Tamaki a couple of months ago, God loves a trier. And he just grinned at me. And I said to him, look, Brian, I'm going to tell you the facts that nobody else is going to tell you. You've got 100,000 members of your church nationwide, and you can't even get 10% of them to vote for you.
Well, that hits them hard, right? Because they just assume all those people are going to vote, and that's how they make their decisions, right? So we've got 100,000, that's 5%, and then they've got friends and, and so on and so on, and they just think, see, we're on a roll.
Yeah.
But, if you spend your time in church on a Sunday and you're building a political movement, you'll want to believe it. So it is what it is.
I have a real problem with people that are leadership in churches being involved in politics, because I know what it takes to be involved in politics. And I think that's incongruent with your beliefs as a Christ follower, to be a politician, which necessitates lying and double dealing and all of the things that go on inside politics. They're the sort of things that you speak against on a Sunday or a Saturday. And so I find it incongruent that they want to stand for Parliament. I just can't see how you can rationalise those two things together.
Well, it's not a big thing in this country, right? Because we are a sect. And we don't buy it. Different Christian parties, there's evangelical, it's that community which kind of gets it. They think they've been touched by God to lead the unsaved. So they just get this in their head, and they look at, say, in the States where the churches are cultural, deep cultural ties, and it's not that way in the rest of the West. And so in New Zealand, we've never bought into this, God stuff in politics. Like to think that in the States, of course, you've all got to pretend as that you're Christians so you can get elected to dog catcher. In this country, you had John Key, you had Helen Clark, you had, a whole swag. No prime minister wears their religion. And Keith and Chris Luxon, of course, does the opposite. He plays it down because he knows it's just not a Kiwi thing. You know?
Yeah,
And
I mean, that's what I find difficult with Chris Luxon, because like myself, I'm a Christian. I wear it on my sleeve, and it doesn't matter to me that people will point their finger and say, oh, well, you're this and you're that. I don't care, right? I've got my faith, and that's fine. And other people don't have faith, and that's fine too. But when somebody says they've got faith and then when they're questioned on it, runs the other way, I really start scratching my head and thinking, I don't think you're the man for me.
Are you ashamed of, which one are you ashamed? Ashamed of being a Christian or ashamed of being in politics, you know?
Exactly.
Look, I agree with you on that, you know. Bill English was very good on it. He said, you know, my faith is my faith. That's in my life. It guides some of the my values. But, you know, they take a secular approach to doing their job. Yeah. I think Luxton sort of ducking and diving shows something kind of...
He looks sneaky and evasive when he does it.
Well, that's because he's been sneaky and evasive, you know.
Well, on that we agree.
Yeah.
I want to throw a curveball at you, Matt.
Sure.
I was looking at David Farrer's article on the demographics of the current parliament as it stands. And he says 25% of the MPs are Maori. And then I look at the Maori electorates and the vote that goes on there. And there's a very big disconnect between the Maori electorates and the vote that happens there in the general public, where generally you know, Maori are considered to be around 15% of the population. Yet we've got this anachronism from the past that was only ever supposed to be temporary. When you mentioned that you thought this was baked in now, that it was permanent, and we've got a gerrymander or Maori-mander of these seats that are sitting there, that and if you look at the party vote and the number of seats they're going to get, they're actually going to become overrepresented. And then if you look at the statistics of everybody's ethnicity, and this is the terrible thing about ethnicities, once you start cutting into it and peeling back that onion, you start revealing that actually now Pākehā are going to be underrepresented in Parliament. And I know you'd probably say, well, that's a good thing because, you know, it redresses 150 years of whatever, right? But if you're going to live by the sword, you need to die by the sword as well. And if you're going to start talking about ethnicity and percentages and things like that, then you have to do it for all ethnicities. And then we start seeing that we've got a real problem. And I wonder if that is a debate that the National Party are brave enough to have. I know Winston will have it, and I know ACT will have that debate. But is National brave enough to have that debate that, hang on, under MMP, we've had 25% of the MPs elected are of Maori extraction of some point? And but then again, how do you count someone as Maori when actually they're probably European as well?
Well, that's right.
And then that gets us back to the, well, you know, is it one person, one vote that we really should be following for democracy, or do we have to keep doing this Maori-mander to, you know, supposedly give them a hand up?
Yeah, well, it's a curveball, but I can catch it. You know,
sure, I knew you would be able to.
Well, because it's important. That's a debate. You know, a debate, and I think we as a society are mature enough to have those debates. Right? It's not a question of that Māori getting too much or too less. Right?
Yeah.
So I think the debate is two separate things, right? You have kaupapa Māori, those who embrace their Māori approach, like I say, Willie Jackson, you know, and Kelvin Davis, etc., you know, and certainly the Māori Party, you know. And then you got those like a Simon Bridges, and I just pull his name because he's no longer an MP, who have Māori ancestry but don't identify that as an important part of their life.
So David Seymour as well.
Exactly. So they get... And Winston, of course, who everyone all thought was Italian, you know, until we got past his teeth. I'm joking. You know, when you say everyone's Māori, you know, as a quota, well, it's what you identify and what you think is important. I think that's the debate, is whether someone's an accident of birth, as kind of, irrelevant in my view. So, but I think the quota thing is always wrong. Like in the Labour Party is saying, do you put a quota on how many people are gay?
Yeah.
And then you go, how many people should have a business background? How many people, new migrants, which communities, and there's Chinese, but what sort of Chinese? You had the Indian, you say, yeah, but he's Fijian Indian and he's mainland Indian. And it's just to the point of absurdity. And this is where the left, and I use that as in a broad term, but the ideological left have taken identity politics to a ridiculous position, right?
The Greens are a case in point. They've got a constitutional requirement to have a male and a female leader.
Yeah, and that's quite common now.
Sure, so, but with modern identity politics, what is a woman? I mean, you could actually have a man as a co-leader, but identify as a woman.
Before we get into the absurdity of that. But I think the principle of having a representative parliament with voices that is a better mix, and I think that's right. So having people who are new migrants or voices like that, and about people who are Māori and Pākehā, of course, is their two main sort of brands, this country culture. And Pacifica people say, look, it's a good thing. You wouldn't want a parliament of all brown women. You say, because you wouldn't feel that was a representative society. Sure. So I think there are more guidelines. I think when you start to put the rules, and then the list can become a math exercise.
Yeah.
Oh, well, if you're a gay brown woman from Invercargill, it won't be there because you actually bring anything. Is that, we need that to make our quota. And that goes on, unfortunately. You know? And and that's where it becomes a tyranny. Identity becomes tyranny. And you don't actually think, well, what is the mix of people we want? And it doesn't mean it's equal. It means equitable. You say, we want those voices. So there's that. And I think that's a growing, and parties have got to have that. Because at one stage, as you would know, and many of you listeners won't know, is that there was a time where the leader or co-leader or deputy leader of every political party had Māori.
Yeah.
And you know what was done. It was done so that, this is after National done its relationship with the Māori party, right? Everyone got this is so important. And it was doing it for that, not for political reasons or strategic reasons. They were doing it because, we don't want to look racist, And I think that's absurd, of course. So that's just us growing up, right? Now, your challenge is about the Māori seats. They were first put up, when they were put up because of the property. That Māori had communal property, not individual property. And therefore it was seen as, and of course, there was quite a gap between Māori being quite, marginalised, ghettoised, to use an American term, but, they were not part of the mainstream in New Zealand at that time. So that was as we need voices in there. They won't get elected in the general seat, so that would, and the property was a requirement. So it was supposed to be as temporary, you're quite right, and now it's been cemented in. Now you can have that debate. No party, I know they've tried it and it all just turns into a mess, to try and get rid of them. They're part of the culture of this country now, and I think that's that's going to be good for the Māori Party. It's always been good for Labour. They've always had that up their back. In their back pocket, 5 or 6 or 7 seats or 7 seats now, and now locked in. So that is going to be hard to change that. I don't think you can have a debate, but I think the agreement that's too much part of it now. So I think that's different, right? So you've got half a Māori in New Zealand enroll in the Māori seat and half in the general seat.
Yeah,
I was one of those ones who swapped over, and it's partly because I think having the Māori Party voice isn't a bad thing. It's staunch, it takes the line, and it challenges the status quo. But also, those seats fit between Labour and the Māori Party, and so your vote's worth something. When you're in a safe Labour seat or a safe National seat, you think, well, my electorate vote ain't going to matter here. It will matter in the Māori seat, and that's also advantaged the Māori Party sort of over the last decade as more and more Māori, particularly the younger generations, are moving to their Māori seats. and that's affected the outcome of those seats. The youth, articulate youth, the kids who have been educated and becoming very comfortable in their Māoriness are now actively engaged in the Māori seats, whereas before it was a very conservative election. But look, I think the debate has merit. I just think you're pushing it uphill, mate.
Well, that it's a debate that's worth having, and I think we need to be grown up about it, because you know what annoys me the most is that if you do try and start a debate or have a debate, the very first thing that is uttered from those who oppose that debate is that you're racist, just because you want to have a debate.
Well, that's right. And if you, as a male, if you have a debate about a woman, you're a sexist. And if you have a debate about trans policy, you're a homophobe. Yeah, and thus it goes on, because that's the trick. That's the trick to close the debate down. As a woman, I used to watch it in the 70s. As a Māori, I feel, so the white people don't feel emboldened to say, well, actually, I think you're talking crap. So we discipline ourselves. So we stop that debate, and I think that's wrong. I think the debate about Māori, see, in the old days of the general seats, you would never, it was very, you couldn't put your hand on heart and say that Māori could win in general seats if they identified as Māori. So the people who got elected into general seats were anglicised. They're very, like Winston Peters, Ben Couch, Sandra Lee, they were acceptable Māori. Now, the Hone Harawira said, I'm going to run in Northland, that's never going to happen. So They say the voices which are strong pro-Māori won't ever win a general seat. So they've all get on the list now. But you see, and that's why I think the rise of the Māori party sort of in the Māori seats brought some people with quite strong opinions or challenging opinions to mainstream New Zealand, and that's probably a good thing. But let's do that now anyway. So I'm kind of reinforcing your argument. If you can get different voices on the list, then, what's your argument for the Māori seats?
Well, that's right. And, I still think that it's a debate that's worth having.
I'm with you on that. I'm like you. I'm reinforcing your strong view at the beginning of this discussion, is that you look at reality. So those people who think they're going to win, go, good on you, and they get their 1%, and they go, how does it happen? I'm saying to you, great debate, good luck, ain't going to change. So, but, it's not going to change in the near future. Let's put it like that.
Yeah. So let's talk about what happens next. We've got a result. We've got the special votes to come, and that's harder to pick than a broken nose for how that's going to go. We can only really look at history to give us an indication of how that goes. And, I think you'd agree with me that National is likely to lose at least one seat in the specials. They've traditionally done that. And then there's the question over the two Maori party, the Maori electorates that are very, very close on where those go.
Okay.
But let's just assume, let's say the Maori party picks up another one and National loses one. Then the 61, well, that won't be 61, that'll be 60. And we're probably looking at a parliament of 122, maybe 123. It seems to me that National and ACT is going to have to talk to Winston Peters seriously.
Yeah, look, I think we should assume that. Right? We assume that New Zealand First are going to have to be in the mix. However, as you know, right, what National's got to cross its fingers, and certainly David Seymour has got to hope like hell, it's that if the Māori Party does well in the special votes, in the Māori electorates, which I assume they will, and just for your listeners, it's more because that many Māori are in rental accommodation and they move around, so it's more special votes. Yeah. And that's why. And plus, of course, the booths sometimes are very hard to get to in particularly rural areas because they've got to go, spread all over the show. And so what they tend to, a lot of them also will register for sort of on the day, or on the week before, more people than in general seats. So that's why they tend to tip more. And because the Māori Party on the rise, and the Public and Labour on their way down, that they will probably tip even more. So they're 2.6% at the moment, the national poll. I'm actually picking, you see, why I'm doing this is that I think that they'll go over 3% on the party vote, which will give them 4 seats.
Yeah.
So even if they won Kelvin seats, because it's a 0.2% swing, they'll pick that up. If they picked up Kelvin's seat and got over 3%, the overhang is still 1. It doesn't go to 2. So I don't think it's likely that if they get Kelvin's seat, this vote's going to go up as well, because that makes sense. Yeah. So I don't think the overhang will increase. And if it's the other way around, it won't be an overhang. Now, National will leave at 1 seat, so I accept that. And probably 2, but let's just go with 1. So that makes it even, and they'll get the Waikato, the Point Waikato seat in due course, and that will give it an extra seat for them. So that's their best hope, is they only lose 1 seat, and then they can get Point Waikato, and then they'll survive. So that's their best, but I don't think that's going to happen. So they're going to be 1 down, and if the Greens, what happens. And so it's a New Zealand First National Act. Not necessarily a government, but, the bloc.
Yeah.
And Winston, as you know, will extract great wealth for his support.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, we've heard reports that, and I know this is true, that it happened, that it was floated through back channels that National was thinking of offering Winston Peters the role of Speaker. And it was very quickly, a message was sent back, don't even think about it. And I can't even believe that they did that. I mean, I know they did do it. But
seriously? Do you think this is just wannabes in National, like the mid-level sort of fancy? Anyone who knows Winston, right? Well,
that's the thing, isn't it? I mean, the National Party has spent 30 years undermining, white-anting, demonising, criticising, attacking Winston Peters. The only saving grace in this set of negotiations is that none of the people who did that are there in the party now. And I would think that if Christopher Luxon had half a brain, and you'd like to think that he does, but there's scant evidence of this, you would like to think he would quietly tell John Key, Bill English, and a few others to shut up and let it be with us, because if they get themselves involved in the negotiations, well, it says 2 things. It says that Luxon isn't capable of doing it himself, and B, they don't really respect Winston Peters by having the very people who have white-handed and undermined him for so many years involved.
Well, Winston, his pride and his respect are very important, and they've always not understood that. And he was with National, right? He's like, don't you understand what motivates Winston, right? And he's an old Muldoonist, sort of the old conservative, mainstream, decent, the Rob's Mob thing, that's New Zealand First base, right?
Yeah.
These hard-working people, people should get in for nothing, struggle street people, who do the honest day's work. Yeah, that's his community, right? People shouldn't get a privilege, and they shouldn't, And so when the Nats disrespect him, and you just think, what are you doing? But anyway, good luck to them. But you're right. If Luxton allows the old Nats who are no longer there, that sends a message. I'm not my own guy. I don't know what I'm doing. And also, it will make sure that Winston is going to punish him for it. And I'm surprised. He may well be doing it, but and I know, right? The smart thing he would have done is got on the phone to Winston now. Now, say, look, let's see how the results are. But look, I want to build a good relationship regardless. It's about, and Winston deserves that respect, right? He came back once more, and by having that, so you don't have to say, look, if we don't get the numbers, we're going to need your support. It's obvious, but you don't have to promise anything at this time. It's not a relationship, and the relationship's got to go for 3 years. So this talk about Winston will give him, a bauble and a trinket. By giving them a badge as a speaker. That's an insult. And they'll have to be spending their time of saying how they don't want to give him the deputy prime minister because Winston's not there to get the ministry of funny walks. I mean, he's there for real portfolios.
No, and that's the thing. I think that what Winston Peters will do is that he'll insist on the COVID inquiry because he sees that as a way that over a period of a year he can deliver death by 1,000 cuts and generational pain for the Labour Party, because they were the ministers who were all responsible for all of that, and if anyone can make the case and sheet home the blame for the excesses of COVID, it'll be Winston Peters, and I think he'll insist on that. The other things that I think
that gives him a platform.
Yeah,
knows where the bodies will be buried. But again, you see, that was about respect. That Labor disrespected him.
Yeah.
Like the Shipley. Once they disrespect him, he is a man you do not want to feel his eye over personal insults. And the way that he was then banned from Parliament by Mallard, these things all add up. And I'm just thinking, you will reap great pain for that. And it's good politics for him too, right? I mean, he's 1,000 cuts. And he will there, and he'll just go, and that will be his new base, or increase his base. So it's good politics, but it helps that he settles a few scores too.
That's right. And then I think that the portfolios that he'll ask for will be things that are to do with infrastructure, like energy, for example, and perhaps some associate transport type things to fix the roads up north and various other places that need fixing. And there'll be things that will have demonstrable benefits at the end of 3 years that he can point to and say, well, we did that. We wanted those portfolios so we could fix that. And I'm pretty sure he's not going to want to have anything to do with being anywhere near the money side of politics.
Well, I think you're right about things like roads, tangible things like fix the holes in the road stuff, not the bridge and trains to the airport and things which are in the never world, right? He's like, 3 years, this is what I do. And so that's I mean, he's an old style Politico. You deliver to your people in 3 year cycles. In terms of the money, I'll defer to you on that. He under the Bolger government, of course, he was treasurer and made Bill Birch do all the work. So he might not want to give Nicola a free rein on finances, because he's going to wear that. So he'll get himself sort of in there somewhere. So I don't know if he can get away with the finance, but he might put Shane in as associate type finance with David Seymour to keep an eye on them. But, that makes more sense.
But I think where this is going to land, and I think you'd agree with me on this, there is a change of government. There's no way that the left bloc can get up there. They're never going to peel off Winston Peters from that.
That's a given.
But I think also, I actually think that ACT is going to end up marginalised.
Winston's going to make sure of it.
Yeah, because I don't think David Seymour or the chief of staff, what's his name, Andrew Keatles, who of course lives with Jenna Lynch. I don't think Winston wants to have them anywhere near important stuff, because it'll just end up on News Hub one night. Yeah. And he's very, very aware of those sort of things. And so I think that ACT will be. I think that they're ill-equipped to conduct negotiations against somebody like Winston Peters.
Well, maybe. That Winston's wily, not as rodeo. But his thing will be, his maximum position will be, I'll form a government with National and ACT support on supply and confidence. We'll give him some under minister job, associate minister job, right? Now, ACT's not going to wear that, and he's not going to get that, right? So, he won't be able to get away with that. But his brand, as you know, has been saying to New Zealand, I'm the one who stops the extremists. And so he'll be in Luxton's ear saying, do not let that do this. We're not going to wear it. This will not be acceptable, to mainstream Kiwis, the whole bit. And ACT is going to get muted. Because they'll be wanting things. If they think their foreign investment and control stuff is going to happen now, it's over. You know, they could have got it under a national ed government. That's over. Winston Coast, not a chance. And he can look, and you talked about, you know, if you want to talk about mischief, right? Point white, sort of Waikato, you know, Winston could say, if you're going to do that, I'm going to run there. You know,
Yeah.
and then the opposition party, this is all fantasy stuff, right? Because the real word doesn't work like that. Imagine all the opposition parties, if they saw the advantage there, they'll just all pull out and leave a fight between Winston and National and say, good luck. And Winston say, I want a mandate to stop the extremes of acts, you know, and stop the foreigners from coming in here and buying our here. Yeah, well, you know what he'd do.
If I was National, what I'd be doing right now is sitting there and getting David Seymour around the table and saying, right, guys, we're going to actually pull out of Port Waikato. Andrew Bailey's already on the list. He's in Parliament. We're going to gift that seat to New Zealand First, just like we did with Epsom. And that gives New Zealand First a bulwark against being voted out of Parliament at the next election. And it's a gesture of incredible goodwill to say that we are effectively, it's laying down the Wero, isn't it? Saying, here's a gift for you. And if New Zealand First picks that gift up and takes that, then they're locked into the government.
Oh, no, look, when I was chief of staff for the Labor Party, right, I tried to convince the Labor Party not to run against them in the by-election and for the general election in the seat. I said that it locks them in, you know, as a friend for good. Wouldn't do it. I said, look, I'm just telling you, you know, you've got to think like MMP. And, you know, and the same with the Greens, you see, they'd given them a seat at some point at the time, then you get to protect your other seats. But by not doing that, see, now they've got 3 seats. You know, and what you've got to do is you've got to lock them in, you know, and Winston then knows he's safe, but also he knows he can keep a seat, but he's got to be nice to you, right? You know, and that's how you build a relationship. So you're absolutely right. I mean, you know, we could do that because we're not involved in the emotion of it all, right? And the locals feeling up, you know, all that. And so what you've got to do, you've got to handle it well. But yeah, you know, if you sit in you know, as we're doing now, you can sit in a room with your whiteboards up, it makes great sense. And you lock in a permanent centre-right government for a very long time. That's exactly what you do.
Well, I think we've pretty much picked the eyes out of the election campaign, and now we sit here and watch the machinations and see what comes next. But we are going to have a centre-right government. Well, I'm always loath to call the National Party right these days. They're very... I
know. I was speaking to someone like last night. He's on the right of the right, and he still thinks that National's a communist party. And when I said, you know, they'll never touch the real issues, you know. But it's, you know, as we all know, apart from probably ACT, you can put all the parties or sort of New Zealand into the US sort of Democratic Party. But politics are pretty broad, you know. And you know, and I know that the policy difference between Labor and National so small compared to the differences between their coalition partners. You know,
yeah, well, that's right. And you know, National has got a reputation as being the party of the status quo. And that's what's always concerned me about the National Party. They consider themselves to be good managers of the economy that Labor built.
Well, indeed.
Except in this case, there's a mountain. There's a mountain of debt that Grant Robertson built, and there's no hiding that. So there are going to have to be some drastic changes in New Zealand in the coming years.
Well, according to ACT, but we'll see, because Winston ain't going to buy that.
I mean, there's good debt and there's bad debt, right? And I talked about this with Morris Williamson. If you borrow to build something like, Marsden Point, Motunui, dams, that's good debt because you've got something that's intergenerational that will be there.
You know, a debt to buy a house, that's a good debt.
Yeah, but a debt to paint a marae or hand out to the arts sector, or that's just wasteful spending.
It's such a Philistine.
I know, but you know, I look. There's a lot of savings that I could find right now. Like I'd sell TVNZ and Radio New Zealand to the highest bidder and get whatever you can for it. Their legacy media, get rid of them. Put in place a public broadcasting act that says in times of emergency that you can take over the airwaves for a limited time. I would also stop the subsidies of private media companies by saying that all this government advertising is actually in the public interest, so you'll run it for free and we're not going to pay you for it anymore. And then that'll cut the throat of a few of these, compliant media outlets. And I'm quite ruthless when I think about these things.
Yeah, well, the media, I mean, the media has changed. Right? So like this, that's the future, And so the legacy media is the new name for them, right? They're all subsidised, and some now directly, and I think that's outrageous, right? So they're actually giving subsidies to the mainstream press for them to employ people to do stuff because to them it's not market value. And it's just extraordinary, these direct subsidies to media that committees pick who gets what in their political appointments. And of course the media then don't challenge that because it's their money. Well, they get the money. So yes, we might come to different conclusions. I always think there should be one public broadcaster and everything else should
But you would, because you're a communist.
Well, as I say, when people they call me a communist, I always say, I wish. I think you're trying to flatter me.
The other thing that I'd do is look at abolishing and axing the concert program. They could give it the 5 listeners of the concert program who are still remaining.
You are a Philistine. I was joking before, but now I know you are.
Yeah, I'd give them a Spotify account and it'd be a whole lot cheaper. Just get rid of it.
Look, I think it's right. I don't agree with that. But what it is media has changed. Communication has changed. Society's changed. And we're still trying to prop up things from another era. And it's public money being used to prop up things with very little value. Because if you take that proposition, you could be funding, direct funding sports. You could be directly funding all sorts, recreational things. Because who chooses which ones? So it's either all or nothing.
Well, what really rips my undies is the funding of the Royal New Zealand Ballet and the Symphony Orchestra and the Auckland Philharmonia Orchestra. Why are we propping up, 17th century ideals from Europe? Let's just get rid of it.
Well, I think it's very my mind to say it, but you'll know, and your listeners will know. There's the Yes Prime Minister episode on this question. Is that who is the audience for these things? It's the upper middle classes. It's not for the mass of the people. This is a subsidy for the rich. And, so it's cultural and say, this is UK, European culture, ain't Kiwi culture. So, you're asking us to subsidise so the corporations can send their tickets to the clients and the people who don't need a subsidy. And I think there's some common sense with that, really. If you're going to cut, you've got to, at least it's like the Māori seats that you were saying before. You've got to have that debate in an honest and frank way.
Yeah, and that's what we need, and that's what's been missing for the last 6 years, and why people rejected this government is that debate was stifled. It was deliberate. It was calculated. And in many respects, they paid the media to stifle that debate at the same time.
I think that's a conclusion which is fair.
Yeah. And on that note, Matt, I think we'll finish this.
All right, mate. And all proud of you.
Thank you very much. I've long respected Matt McCartan's honesty and robust nature of the way he plays politics. And as you can hear, there is a mutual respect there. His assessments of the election pretty much match mine, but with a bit more nuance from the inside, from the left side, and also the Maori side of politics. It's always fun talking to Matt McCartan, and I always respect his opinions. Tell me your thoughts on what Matt had to say by emailing inbox@realitycheck.radio or text to 2057.
Our text machine is now live. Send us your thoughts by texting your message to 2057. That's 2057. So get in touch with us now. This is The Crunch with Cam Slater. Conversations with a side of controversy, right here on RCR.
Rachel Stewart is a falconer, protector of rivers, climate change warrior, opinionated troublemaker, cancelled lesbian, and a staunch defender of women's rights. We're going to take a look at the various campaigns and get her opinion of the winners, the losers, and discuss where to from here. She joins me now. Welcome to The Crunch. After I interviewed you on breakfast, I thought it'd be fantastic to have you back on, and let's do a post-mortem of what I think is a pretty exciting election.
Yes. Oh, it was like I'm just still coming down, and I'm sure you are too. It was a once-in-a-lifetime election. I don't think we'll see another one quite like that for a while.
Yeah, I mean, it's huge if you look at the numbers. I mean, Labor has lost half of their electorates. You know, some of those, they were only going to have them temporarily, but it's a massive swing. They've lost nearly 50% of their vote. Everyone talks about 1990 being a huge election. The swing in the 1990 election was 12%. The swing in this election is closer to 50%.
Yeah.
And it's only because of the vagaries of MMP that they're going to have, 33 MPs when they really should have 16. But yeah, it was a bloodbath. Don't think you can describe it any other way. And Labor, I think, had misread the feel of the electorate. What do you think about that?
Oh, without a doubt. But, probably misread it less than the media did. I've been pretty surprised to see some of the comments from Tova O'Brien and Paula Penfold. I mean, Tova O'Brien made some comment along the lines of, who could, hand on heart, stand by the grave of a dearly departed loved one and say that they saw this coming?
Yeah,
well,
I can.
I think I can, but I just don't think the people in the bubble did, and it's been quite incredible to watch. But I also notice it's day 2 since the election, day 3 since the election. They're starting to walk some of this stuff back. But I've never seen a fourth estate so ridiculously out of touch.
No, they're bent.
Yeah, well, yeah, they are bent.
They're a lock for the left and the hard left, most of them. We've got surveys of journalists. They've told us the truth in their surveys. They've told us that 78% of them are left-wing or very left-wing. But you're right. I mean, how could Tova O'Brien even say that? But the most bizarre one was Dita Deboni from NBR.
Oh, yes.
Quite crazy, quite defamatory, actually, in some of the statements she was making, saying there was big amounts of foreign money that bought this election.
I watched it. I couldn't quite believe it. I thought, wow, man, you've been drinking something in that green room. But she was on the verge of tears. I mean, this was a journalist that works for NBR. She's such a left-wing shill that I'm amazed she does work for NBR. I can't kind of figure that one out. But it was quite embarrassing to watch, and I wonder if she's going to look back on that and think, so they're living in bubbles, these people, and hers was defamatory. To think that there's some connection between the money donated to the particular party and an election win is a bit of I don't think anyone thinks about that when they're voting. It doesn't take lots of money to be really good at social media, which National was. It doesn't take a lot of money to just, the electorate wanted change. That's it. Bottom line.
On election night, Morris Williamson was doing some stuff for Reality Check Radio for our webinar, and he made the comment that Labor lost Auckland badly, and he couldn't work it out. And I said, well, Morris, you were overseas at the time when that happened, so you actually don't understand what went on here, where we were locked down, we were locked up for months and months on end. And it was all designed to push the vaccines as hard as they could on everybody, especially in Auckland, where the numbers were a little bit behind the rest of the country. And for those 3 or 4 months that they kept us locked down in 2021, that was the beginning of the end for the government, particularly in Auckland. And you just have to walk around, I live in Takapuna, so you walk around there, the shops there's still empty shops.
Yes.
Small business was hollowed out and destroyed by this government because of their lockdowns, and it was also unnecessary.
Yes, it was. I totally agree. The mandates were a terrible idea. The lies that have come out, the vaccine exemptions for the Ministry of Health, 11,005.
Yeah.
I don't know what they think we were doing when we were all locked down. I mean, I don't live in Auckland, but we certainly watched you guys and thought, wow, how long can they stand? I mean, yes, we got locked down, but you had, how many weeks was it? Something like 17 or?
It was like 3 months.
Was it?
3 or 4 months. It was a long time, and it dragged. To be fair, I wasn't the kind of person to be locked down. I was out driving around, going and having lunch with my mates. They talked about bubbles. Well, my bubble would have been hundreds of people.
But I hear you.
Yeah.
But
that's what people did because, it was ridiculous.
Yeah,
absolutely ridiculous.
It was inhuman. It was inhuman, and they paid the price. And you just wonder why they did it. When the rest of the world was not carrying on like we were, you have to wonder to yourself, why?
Well, I think they just got drunk on power. I think they got a kick out of stomping on our rights.
Yeah.
And if you look at the gaslighting that's gone on since, Christopher Hipkins saying that no one was forced to take the vaccine. Well, that was just a lie.
Yeah, he just lost about 10,000 votes right there.
Yeah, and then in the last debate, they said, "Is there anything you do different?" And he said, "Oh, I think I would have done MIQ differently."
Oh.
Well, Morris Williamson explained that this on Monday morning on the political panel with me and Paul Brennan. He said, I actually wrote a program that would allow MIQ to be done very quickly, and I was told, go away. We don't want your code. We're going to do what we're going to do. So I don't think he actually would have done it differently. I mean, and that's what everybody forgets. Chris Hipkins was the minister in charge of education, and look at our education statistics. He was the minister of police for a while. Look at our crime statistics. And he was the COVID minister. And now he's gaslighting us thinking to say that, well, it wasn't him. Well, that's bullshit.
He was brutal, actually, in all of those roles. He was far more brutal as having those portfolios than he was as Prime Minister. So I didn't forget, and I'm sure most people didn't.
No,
well, they didn't.
And we rinsed them. And I had a chat with Winston on election night. I had my interview, and then after that, I asked him a couple more questions, off the record. It was an interesting chat, and I have the distinct impression that he has some unfinished business with some utu for the Labour Party. He was quite strident and quite strong in what he was saying, and he sees the pathway for that is this COVID inquiry, because he believes that the truth will come out. And when the truth comes out, he doesn't believe Labour will get in for at least 10 to 12 years.
Yeah, and I agree. In fact, I think even now, without that COVID inquiry, they'd be lucky to get in another 10 or 12 years. This is the end of the Labour Party for quite a long time, and I think it's thoroughly deserved.
Yeah, I saw an article that Chris Trotter wrote saying, what do they even stand for anymore? They certainly don't seem to stand for the working class.
No, that for me was one of the biggest issues. They have left them behind to such an unbelievable extent that, just like the Democrats in America, no wonder Trump does so well. When you leave the working class behind, you've kind of the people that keep the country running, the people that have backed you for decades, then you're really dicing with death. And I don't even think that was a thing that they were really cognizant of doing. They just went ahead and looked after the managerial elites and the wokies and the middle class, and that's cost them. And they're going to have a real big think about that. The working class have now pretty much either gone to Winston or National. National probably obviously more because suddenly they're there for the working class in a way that Labor wasn't.
And it's huge, the change. I mean, we've seen it in the United States, and so we shouldn't have been surprised to see it happen here.
No.
And but it looked like a real surprise, mainly to the media and to Labor. The Greens, of course, think that they've done a fantastic campaign.
Yeah.
They don't actually realise that probably half of their support this election is because Labor was so crap. Yeah. And so the hard left voted for the Greens, and that'll be a fleeting high point, I think, in the Greens.
Yes, because they'll stuff it up somewhere along the line too. And James Shaw I believe, will be gone. He won't get rolled. He's just going to leave at some point soon. That's pretty clear to me. I don't know what you think, but he's off.
Well, Matt McCartan had an interesting point of view. He said that with winning 3 electorate seats, that will be permanent. He doesn't believe that Labor will win those back or National will win those back.
Right.
And he believes that when you've got an electorate seat, you lose the crazy because there are constituents who will shout at you if you do anything crazy, and they will become then a calming influence on the Greens. Now, that remains to be seen.
Yes.
I don't actually believe it because I think they're all crazy.
Yes. I do too.
Here's the funny thing, Rachel. You're a hunter, a farmer. You live in rural New Zealand. I'm a hunter. We should be green voters, really. For the environment. You've fought federated farmers and dairying and all of these sorts of things around the environment. Your environmental credentials are impeccable.
Yeah,
we should be natural green voters, but we just don't fit into that. I've had this discussion with James Shaw, and he just laughed at me, and I said, "Well, why not? Why won't you appeal to the middle New Zealand instead of the hard left? You get more votes."
I often reflect on this, and a lot of people over the years have assumed that I'm a Green supporter. Never voted for them. Never will in this incarnation. But I'm a great believer in fresh water, and I do worry about dairying's impact on that. But a few years ago, I decided to just pull my head in and shut up about it, because I'd done my dash, I'd raised the issues. I think there is too much dairying in New Zealand, and I think there's still a lot of work to do. But what I realised as the world is spiralling in a way that we've never really seen before is that the Green Party is not the portal that I want to walk through to make those things happen. But second of all, picking on farmers at a time with COVID and all of that was something I had to stop doing. And also they're my tribe, in the end, they're my tribe. And some of them are greener than anybody that I know living in downtown Auckland or downtown Palmerston North or Whanganui. So that wasn't the vehicle for me, and it's still not the vehicle for me. And I think National's policies on freshwater aren't too bad. I've had a bit of a look at them in the last day or so.
Yeah.
I've changed on that score. I think when times are tough, you've got to keep your country going, and that means supporting whatever makes money. And unfortunately, that is dairying, or fortunately.
I mean, it's the one thing we've got to always fall back on in New Zealand, even when times are tough. The world needs to eat, and they need our products that we make the finest products that come off the farm in the world.
Yes.
But there are greater things that we need to also look at, and our manufacturing base in New Zealand has been hollowed out by 30 years plus of neoliberalism.
Yes.
And globalism hasn't helped us one little bit in that point. And whilst you think you should be a Green voter and you can't bring yourself to be that. I used to be a National supporter, but I can't bring myself to support National anymore because they're globalist in their outlook in every regard.
Absolutely. And when these parties are not using certain terms like, I don't know, WHO, WEF, you just think to yourself, Winston was doing that, so I kind of gravitated there at least. I mean, the world has changed. Right?
Oh, yeah.
But these parties haven't really changed with it. And so Winston was a good option for a lot of people. And that's where I felt more at home this election because, like he said in the interview with you, we need a watchdog, and I don't know a better pit bull watchdog than Winston. So, we needed that. I'm so glad he's there. I'm so glad this has worked. He's going to be, and I can't see that being any different. I think when the specials come in, Labor's going to get a couple more probably, but National might lose a couple. But they're going to have to be talking to him. We know that, and I think that this is good.
Absolutely, they're going to talk to him. I was sitting with him on Saturday night, and everyone around was losing their stuff, and he was sitting there with a big grin on his face. And we went outside and had a cigar and a chat. And he said, "You watch, Cam. You watch these numbers, right? Luxon's come out. He's on nearly 41%. He's claimed victory. You watch those numbers. They're going to drop down into the 38s by the end of the night." And, we sat there and we watched it. We recycled it. And I was saying, "You called it, Winston." He says, "I'll make sure my phone's off. I'm going to wait till they have to call me." And, we saw all of the grandstanding on Saturday night. And then we started to see the walking back on Sunday. And then on Monday, it looks like Chris Bishop and some of the brains trust of the National Party woke up and thought, we better get a calculator here and actually start doing some arithmetic.
Yeah, exactly.
And then panic set in. And, I know that from the back channels, from what I'm hearing, they're sitting there thinking, okay, we're not going to get there with just National and ACT. We are going to lose at least one seat. The Maori Party looks like they're going to pick up another 2 seats and create an overhang, and 61 out of 123 ain't enough.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden, Winston once again is in the driving seat, and I hope he drives a very hard bargain, and I hope he does get that COVID inquiry.
So do I. And he's I got to say, and I'm sure you agree, he taught them a salutary lesson in how to do politics. He taught them about they should take a leaf out of that man's book about how to campaign. His ads were fantastic. The Rudyard Kipling poem was
brilliant.
Dynamite.
Brilliant.
It just played into everything I wanted to hear. It was just fantastic. He showed them how to do it. Now people say, he's a populist. So that's how you win elections, man. That's how you do it.
Exactly.
So I'm very happy that Winston's there. He was gracious on the night. He made the right comments. Christopher Luxon was gracious in return, to be fair.
Yep.
Luxon does seem to me, to my eye, to be, it's a long way to go, but he seems fairly sensible and reasonably kind. And I hate using the word kind because we all know you used to use that.
We hate that, don't we? Yeah.
We hate that word. Sorry, he seems very warm in a way. So I think it's going to be an interesting 3 years for sure. And I'm so glad Winston's there. I couldn't sleep for being overjoyed about that result.
Coming back from getting bundled out in 2020, this is the second time he's come back. It's just incredible, really, when you think about it.
Yes, like he said, they've done the impossible.
But he was helped by stupidity from first of all the ACT Party, and then the Labour Party attacking him. And then finally, Chris Bishop having a panicked moment the Monday before the election, talking about second elections and nonsense like that.
Yeah. It was terrible.
Who else had a good campaign, do you think?
Well, I think individuals had some good campaigns. National pretty much had what National did?
I can't say they did because
I don't.
This was the worst government ever, and they couldn't get over 40%.
Yeah, pretty well. What did it end up on?
38 something, but it'll come back a little bit on that.
Yeah.
But John Key was consistently over 40%.
He was. Yeah. So they're not. So the electorate's changing. I will say that they had a safe, except for the brain farting of the second election stuff, which was clearly undemocratic and just a dumb thing to say.
Yeah.
But I think that what they did quite well was just not talk about lots of things and keep their head down. That was evident when something dear to my own heart, when Luxon was asked about, men and women's toilets, and he said, "What? You're joking? This is an election issue." Well, A, he doesn't realise that it bloody well is, and B, he just wasn't going to go anywhere near anything contentious. He kind of just kept his head down, knowing that he could win that way. So I guess in that sense they had a good campaign. But individuals...
It was small target stuff, wasn't it? Make yourself a small target. make a pitch to the electorate that you'll be just like Labor but more efficient, and don't scare the horses, which is how John Key got elected in 2008.
Yeah. So yes, you're right. It wasn't a great. Anyone else? Well,
I think the Maori Party, Te Pāti Maori, had a great campaign because we didn't see it, right? No, we didn't see it because we're in the general. We're looking at the global perspective for New Zealand, right? They had a very targeted campaign to get rid of Labor out of the Maori electorates. And you have to say it was successful. They're sitting on 4. They think they're going to get 6.
Yeah.
And I think they'll get 5. 6 might be a push, but you never know. But, talking with Matt McCartan, he thinks they're going to get those other 2.
Does he?
And that will take out Kelvin Davis, although he'll still be on the list, but he won't have the mana of having an electorate. And it'll take out Pena Henare as well. That's a famous name, that surname.
Yes, it is.
And if he
like Mahuta is a very famous name.
Exactly. I mean, taking out Nanaia Mahuta, the architect of the co-governance divisive policies that they brought in, taken out by the Maori Party.
Yeah.
So you have to say they had a good campaign.
I was disappointed with the coverage of Hana. Is it Hana? Who beat Mahuta. I was disappointed in that very weird stuff about the man going to the house and he got a
strange.
That was very strange, and I didn't enjoy that. And I felt that was a complete ploy. It just felt that way. There weren't enough details, so that disappointed me. But look, it seems to have worked. But they did run a good campaign.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting one that you raised because I suspect, even though they tried to blame the National Party, I suspect it was actually Labor people that were harassing her.
Yeah.
Just because I know that's how the way they play.
Yeah.
You know, and it was rather shabby the way the Te Pāti Maori put that out into the media.
Yes, it was. It was a little bit dirty.
Yeah. But has anybody else had a good campaign? I don't think they have. I don't think David Seymour had a good campaign.
Oh, terrible. I was watching him a lot and I kept thinking something's happened to you. There's something going on. And he just kept, and I was at the hairdressers this morning, as you do, and I was talking to the girls there, and you find some interesting things out at the hairdressers. And
always.
And they were saying, that David Seymour's a bit of well, actually, dick was the word they used. And I said, he had a terrible campaign. They said, he just shot himself in the foot every 5 seconds. And, of course, the worst thing he did, and he looked terrible. He just looked down and dowdy and not right. But the worst thing he did was saying he wouldn't work with Winston. What a dumb move that was, and a rookie's mistake, really, early on.
I mean, how do you think he's feeling right now? Because, in the last leaders' debate that he was in with Winston, he was asked, do you trust Winston Peters? And he said no. Very quickly, he said no.
Yeah.
But everyone who's ever worked with Winston Peters, Jim Bolger, John Key even said you can trust Winston Peters. Matt McCartan says you can trust Winston Peters. Mm-hmm. Helen Clark said you can trust Winston Peters. But here's David Seymour, who's never worked with Winston in his life, has spent his entire parliamentary career attacking and slaying and sledging Winston Peters. Here he is saying no. And the voters have said, well, David, you might not trust him, but you're going to have to work with him.
Yep. And that was beautiful. And that's why people used it as a protest vote. And it was there for the taking. And I think David Seymour is dedicated to being, a prime minister or a deputy prime minister. He's dedicated to that. And that's probably what he's going to be, deputy prime minister. But in the process, you just don't do what he did. It was just stupid. But he wants to be in power and have lots of power. And that's why I wanted Winston there.
It's unbecoming when you see politicians so obviously seeking power like that. It's unedifying, and it clearly shows that they're in politics for themselves and not for us.
Yes. And speaking of that, did you notice the clip of Dan Rosewarne, who I'd never heard of before, but now I'm never going to forget the guy. The Koru Club membership.
He says, you're out of power when you go to the Koru Club and your membership's been cancelled.
You go from champagne to lemonade. Oh, what a stupid thing to say. I mean, I doubt that overnight their Koru Club was cancelled, but whatever. I don't even know. But it was just a stupid thing to say.
They're pretty efficient, the people
Are they? Yeah.
in Parliament.
And
you're in, you're not.
Yeah, see, yeah. And Jan Tinetti she's still on the list, of course, but I consider her one of the worst MPs I've ever seen, and so not capable. It's unbelievable. She's incapable, really. Standing there, coming through the Tauranga airport saying, it's a relief.
Yeah.
It's a relief. Well, that's how much you care about education, sister.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the trouble when you get union hacks into positions rather than people with any experience. But you used a word there, incapable. That is probably the best word to describe the Ardern-Hipkins government, isn't it? Incapable. They were incapable of building houses.
Yes.
They were incapable of planting trees. They were incapable of solving child poverty. They were incapable of building even 1 millimetre of rail track to Auckland Airport.
Mm-hmm.
These were all of their huge policies that they announced in 2017 that they were going to deliver. It was going to be transformative. It was all just bumper sticker slogans, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. And, you know, in a normal world, which we're not in, but in a normal world, a government that announces in 2017 that they're going to build 100,000 houses, and then we get to 2020, they'd be out on their ass. But no, Jacinda kept us safe, so we voted for her. I don't find many people who admit to doing that who are national voters. I'm sure I'm surrounded by a lot of them, but they don't admit to it because Jacinda kept us safe. Well, really? And she should have been, that government should have been out on its ear then, just for that alone.
Yeah.
When they built what? I think in that time they ended up, in that 3-year period, built 1,400. I think that might be too many. I'm not sure. But it wasn't much.
Well, on election night, Chris Hipkins was saying that, you know, they've done some stunning things in government. They've managed to build 13,000 homes. And not a single journalist said, well, hang on a second, aren't you 87,000 houses short of the 100,000?
Yeah.
You know?
I know. They just didn't. So it was, I just feel that 6 years that is now, thank the Lord, over. I feel that the ego and the hubris and mixed with the woke
and the incompetence
and the incapability and the lack of depth on that bench of Labor where there was no one to fill the positions. And then Kerry Allen's, you know, major misstep was just summed it up to me fantastically. I just couldn't stop laughing about that. And it would just how they lasted 6 years, how they got in a second time, well, we do know how. But, yeah, to me it's just a nightmare that's finally that chapter's over. I'm not saying that the next one can't be nightmarish. I'm sure that we'll get delivered there's going to be some shocks when they open the books properly.
Yeah, that's what
it's not going to be it's not going to be what was presented in the preview. No. So I'm just glad this chapter is closed.
You know, I look back on the end of the Muldoon years. I remember those quite clearly. There were a lot of National Party people that voted to get rid of Muldoon. They were dancing on his grave, literally. You know, there was even jokes were being made by cabinet ministers later when he subsequently passed away that they were going to go and make sure that there was a stake through his heart so he could never come back. That's how deeply despised that he was. We saw then, of course, the Longy government, which was deeply despised as well, and we ended up with Jim Bolger, and he sort of ignominiously slipped out the back door in 1999, and we ended up with Helen Clark. And, you know, boy, we celebrated when she went in 2008. But you know what? She wasn't anywhere near as bad as this lot. I thought that I could see good things in every politician that I've met over the years, but I've failed to see any good things in Jacinda Ardern.
Yes, I read your classic column. I thought that was priceless about how you thought she was, evil. I think evil. You didn't hold back. But, you know, that was the first column of yours that I'd read, the first thing I'd read of yours for years. And I remember reading it and going, wow, yeah, he's right. What's happened to Cam? Wow, this is amazing. It was so well written, and I don't think there were many people that didn't. Well, certainly not many people around me that disagreed with it. I thought it was very powerful.
Well, that article's been read 500,000 times.
Yeah. It's funny how the world loves her. It's funny how the world loves her, but
Well, they haven't lived with her.
Sorry?
They haven't lived with her.
No, they haven't lived with her. That's right.
Now, there's a reason why she's living overseas now. Like, she can't come back here.
No.
I talked to Max Bradford at the end of the Bolger years, and he said we knew we were going to lose then because as you walk down the street down Lambton Quay, people wouldn't stop and talk to you. They'd just keep on walking, and you became increasingly isolated. Your phone would be ringing less and all of those sorts of things. And you can always tell when you're on the way out because of that. And I've always remembered that line that he said. And then I thought to myself, imagine how many people ring Jacinda Ardern's phone. It's got to be almost nobody.
Yeah. Must be, yeah. She must be at Harvard just like rubbing her hands together, just thinking, how can I destroy New Zealand further with destroying free speech?
Last minute she came out and, put it on TikTok or whatever it was, Instagram or whatever she does, saying, please vote for Chris Hipkins. He's a good man. I thought that's the final nail in the coffin. That's going to seal their fate.
I thought having her was dumb.
Yeah. They should never have used it. They should have actually made her persona non grata. I mean, they tried, but they kept being caught. I mean, they rolled out Helen Clark, but you know what? I actually respect Helen Clark.
Well, Helen Clark's got a brain.
Well, and ability.
Oh, really? She had a finger in every pie. She knew exactly what was going on, eh?
Yeah, I mean, I don't agree with her politics.
No.
I don't think she did anything spectacular with her time in office. In fact, the thing that she did that was most spectacular in her time in office was uniting the Labour Party and all the different factions and keeping them under control. But there's no signature thing that she did that I can recall. No. And the same as with John Key. There's nothing huge that he did.
No.
He was a competent manager of the status quo.
Yeah.
He didn't change anything.
No, he kept them tight. He kept them very tight. Yeah.
But see, Jacinda Ardern came to New Zealand politics with a whole lot of headline things that they were going to do and then didn't do any of them.
No.
And so her record really has to be one of the worst prime ministers in New Zealand's history.
I'd have to say. I can't really think of anything either. I mean, at least when we talk about Winnie, because someone said to me the other day, oh, Winnie, what's he ever done? And they were youngish. And I said, well, have you heard of the gold card? Because, that's a pretty good thing. And they're going, what's that? They might have been in their 40s. I said, well, you'll find out probably one day if you're lucky what he did. And, we all have that in the wine box. And there are various things that we can refer to that he's achieved. And he's never been a prime minister.
No. And he's achieved huge things that he's achieved. And if even a fraction of the MPs that have been through Parliament had achieved as much as Winston Peters has achieved, we'd be in a much better place.
Yeah.
So I hope that Christopher Luxon does get some sensible people around him that says, right, let's sit down and talk. And you know what? I don't think David Seymour will get Deputy Prime Minister.
Don't you?
I think that Christopher Luxon will want someone who is wise and been around for a while to be his deputy, not someone who's prone to silly mistakes.
Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting because he's going to fight for that. I'm pretty sure that's what he's going to go for.
Well,
we'll see.
The thing is that he painted himself into a corner. He said he can't work with Winston Peters and won't work with Winston Peters. But where else is he going to go? Is he really going to sit on the crossbenches and hold everyone to ransom? Well, that's a recipe for being destroyed at the next election.
Yeah.
So if he wants to pull that trigger, I'm saying go right ahead. Winston will be laughing and thinking, well, I'm going to get all your votes because no one's going to trust you.
Yeah, he's a bit of a weak link, actually, and Winston will be watching him like a bird of prey.
Well, it's an interesting thing about you. Not many people know about Rachel is that you are into falconry.
Yes, I am.
This is to divert from politics for a little bit because I'm interested in that.
Yeah, go for it.
How many people are into falconry in New Zealand?
I think there's 9 of us with permits.
Right.
9. and I know pretty much most of them. Department of Conservation are making things pretty difficult, and it got legalised a few years ago, but we'll see if they change their mind again. But at the moment, 9, but in America, say it's completely legal, set to stringent standards, and so I prefer to do a hell of a lot of it over there.
All right.
Yeah, so I go over there most years, but not the last few. But it's a fascinating sport, Cam, and I'd love to take you out sometime and we can chase a rabbit around and see what these birds do naturally with or without us.
Yeah, I mean, I'll take you up on that opportunity. I think that's the thing I've always admired about you is that little quirk, that cool thing that you do. Like, I'm just sitting there going, when somebody said to me, "Oh, bloody Rachel Stewart,"
yeah, they all did it.
She said this and that. I said, "Yeah, but she hunts with hawks."
So I'm absolved from anything I've ever said. Yes, a lot of people dislike me intensely, and I.
Well, too bad. Lots of people dislike me intensely.
Yeah, so you're right. You're right.
I don't care. Right. I don't care.
No, and I don't care. I've got to the point where I don't care. But as an aside, just off falconry too, but back to politics. I don't know if you know this, Ken, and I don't talk about it as many people because it's so long ago. But in 1987, I stood for the Labour Party in the then Waitotoa electorate.
Oh,
which
yes.
Is the old, and Ven Young was the safest man.
Yeah.
Yes. And
jowly old Ven Young.
Yeah, old Ven, and I campaigned out of Haldera, but it was my home electorate because in those days it was right around rural Wanganui.
That's Audrey Young's dad.
That's right. Mm. And I lost, but got second to a guy, I can't remember his name, but he was a Democrat. Usually in Waitotoa, that safe national seat, Democrats got second, but I got second this time, and I was train driving at the time. I was a train driver. And I was rolling through those areas a lot, but I took 6 weeks off because in those days you got full pay to campaign.
Yeah.
And anyway, I lost, but I didn't lose ridiculously badly. I think I did better than any other candidate before in the Labour Party. And that night when you went to concede, I went to the Harbour RSA or maybe the Cosy, I can't remember, one of those clubs to see Ven. And I walked in and he calls me over and everyone's very kind and nice, and I sit down with him and he pours me a beer and he said, "You know what's funny, Rachel?" He said, "I've always wanted to be a train driver, but you want to be a politician." And, what a nice guy. He was, Ven Young was a great guy, actually.
Yeah, yeah.
And the reason I did that at 24 years of age was because, this is how naive you are when you're young. The nuclear-free policy I liked. Yeah. And Longy was, and these guys, the Roger Douglas era was very much about picking up that neoliberal ball and running with it. And I thought that was the direction we should be going in and taking the subsidies off farmers. And my father was not happy about me supporting that. But anyway, it was a good experience. And then I thought, they said, "Well, you get Wanganui if you do this for us." And then I thought at the end of that, I'm never going to do this again. This is horrible. And I could have had Wanganui and I could have been there. Jill Pettis ended up having it for years. And now the thought of voting Labour is the most horrible thought I can possibly imagine. Well, from a candidate to voting New Zealand First. Unbelievable. Never voted New Zealand First in my life. But look, I turned 60 in November last year. So you don't look a day over 40, Rachel. Thank you, dear. But what it gives you is a little bit of insight into, as as you age, you get a little bit of insight into the politic. And if anyone had said to me even in 2017, in 2023, you'll be voting for Winston Peters, I would have said, "You're joking." Yeah. But the world is changing, and there was a logical, most intelligent vote, I think, for anyone to make, and I'm really glad that people like you and me could deliver him back. Yeah, I mean, people said that I was a lock for Winston, but you know what? I wasn't really. There's a lot of things I disagree with them on, but you know what I like doing with Winston Peters is sitting down and having a chat with him and fighting my corner and having him, jab and joust and argue particular things. And then the most satisfying thing of all of that is several months later, hearing him make a speech and making the same points that I was making to him, just 3 or 4 months earlier. And that tells me that he's a politician who's willing to listen. He wants to have a discussion so he can test ideas.
And if those ideas pass muster and he goes and checks things out that's been said and there's evidence supporting it, then he adopts that. And, I think that's what we should have in every politician, that ability to not to be so doctrinaire or, know-it-all. I mean, the Labour Party's appalling for this, on being know-it-alls. It's our idea, so it's the best idea. And I've found in politics, often the best ideas come out of left field, if only you'll listen to them.
Well, I went and saw River of Freedom finally. It was in Whanganui last week. I saw it last Thursday night, just before the election. And I thought, I hope they're going to show Winston walking. And there he was. And it was interesting. I was sitting in this packed house with many Maori, actually, everywhere. And they had obviously been down to Wellington, and they were saying, there's Auntie, and there was lots of laughing. And then Jacinda came on, and there was boo, instant kind of reactions from everybody. And then Winnie came out, and they were just like, yay. And it was great. It was, and they showed him, and he was asking the questions. And I'm sure you've seen the film by now.
Yeah, I've seen the film. Yeah, I went to the premiere of it.
Oh, yeah. Very good. I was very impressed. And it made me think, I'm doing the right thing on Saturday. He went and listened to the bloody people. That's what he did. And
some people tried to get him to make a speech, and he said, I'm not here to talk, I'm here to listen.
Yeah.
And he did that. But, that I think that is probably one of the most important movies that has been made in New Zealand in quite some time, because it shows how badly the media gaslit us all about the Wellington protest. And it showed a completely different side of this movement of people that had simply had enough nationwide and jumped in their cars and their trucks and their camper vans and whatever and drove to Wellington to make a point.
Yeah.
And I think
most of them were Labour and Green voters.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
That's right. And then they stood there and arrogantly said, these people don't represent us. We're not going to talk to them.
Yeah.
That's why I can't vote for the National Party, because they were part and parcel of that. That's why I couldn't have voted for the ACT Party, because they were part and parcel of that.
Same for me.
They stood there and abused their citizens by refusing to listen to them.
Yep. Same for me. I couldn't bring myself to go national. I just couldn't do it. And I've never voted ACT, and I wouldn't have, certainly on the strength of this campaign. But I just couldn't do it. I had to do something different. And that was because I watched New Zealanders, our citizens, decent people, being told they were throwing feces, and I just found that appalling. And I remember talking, sorry?
It was all made up.
It was all made up.
Do you remember when they said, we've seen pitchforks in the hands of protesters as weapons, so we're moving in the police? Well, whenever the police raid a gang pad or, do a drug bust or everything, they take photos and they line up all the guns and all the money and all the drugs and everything they show, and all the weapons that they find, everything. Even a crowbar will be in the photo, right?
Yeah.
Did we see any photos of what the police found after that? Not one. Did we see any pitchforks? No.
No. It was disgusting. It was a disgusting display, and I remember thinking, I just couldn't believe what I was seeing. I was so disheartened in New Zealand and the police. I couldn't. Andrew Coster, I hope his days are gone. He's probably numbered, and I hope he is.
Well, I'm hoping that Winston's got a list, his Utu list of civil servants and people that should be rinsed, but I'm hoping that Coster is at the top of that list or somewhere near the top of that list.
Yeah, I think we'll be watching with interest and seeing what happens. Yep.
So what's your overall impression then of the election, the campaign, and the results?
It was different from anything I'd ever experienced before. I think that would be true for a lot of New Zealanders. There wasn't much heart in it, apart from, like you say, the Maori Party and Winston. I always say Winston, but I should say New Zealand first, because one day he won't be here, and that's going to be a sad day. I think it was like no other election I've ever seen. It was pretty election light. There wasn't a lot of commitment from a lot of politicians that should have been more committed. David, of course, Seymour was disappointing. I'm glad it's over. It was It was disjointed and kind of weird, really. It was a bit surreal, to be honest, the whole thing. But election night made it all just go away and dissipate. And I felt better.
You sound better.
Yeah, I'm happier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got rid of the tyranny.
We have. For now, we'll see. We'll see what happens. But yes, it's like and you'll be feeling the same. This weight has just lifted off us. And that's what Jan Tonetti said, of course, about her portfolio. But for the voters, I think it's a new day, and there's a lot of people feeling pretty good. I'm sure there's a number of people feeling very bad. And, oh, my heart bleeds for you.
Yeah. I mean, that weight you're talking about that's lifting off us, that's the press of the knee and the jackboot being lifted.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Because I felt that very strongly, and I'm sure you did too.
Oh,
I
absolutely.
felt that very strongly. And
I nicknamed Jacinda Jackboot Jacinda.
Yeah. That was awful.
But she thinks she was wonderful, and did no wrong. I mean,
no wrong.
The hubris, the arrogance, it's actually narcissistic personality disorder.
Yeah. And some of the supporters who just love her no matter what she did. Oh, and she had a baby while she was, wow, so what? Anybody can have a baby. Apparently men can have them now anyway.
Oh, apparently, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I just thought, well, that's okay, great. That doesn't make her a star. It doesn't make her anything. It just means she had a baby while she was in office.
Yeah, but it was all just done for headlines. And that's the most shameful thing of Jacinda Ardern's prime ministership. It was all done so that she could be the first at this, the first at that, the first to do this, the first. And in reality, she wasn't the first at anything.
No. Nope.
She didn't even come first in the election except in 2020. In 2017, when she became prime minister, she was second.
Yep. It's interesting during the election too, Cam, how much the national supporters on Twitter, and when we expect that from that Hell site, but really tried to get us to distrust him. He's not to be trusted. That was just such a line.
Yeah.
So what I'm seeing happening now, and I hope we can take this into the future very clearly, is that so many people are awake to this media stuff now. Yeah. So many people now know that when they were dissing Winston and trying to take him out of the game, that it just emboldened a lot of people. It made us feel, right, this is unfair. So keep doing it, and we're just going to vote him in. Sure enough, what happened?
Well, it's like the Labour Party with their picture of Winston Peters smiling on Christopher Luxon in his pocket. And when I saw that, I thought that's exactly what I want to vote for.
Yeah.
Yeah. And looks like that's going to come true. So it's going to be very interesting.
It is. It is.
And I'll tell you what, I'm definitely going to take you up on your offer to come falconing with. I think that'll be.
Why not? Well, you ever come down this way, Cam?
Yeah, I do actually. Couple of times a year I head down that way, usually going after goats and stuff like that,
What, up the river, the Whanganui River?
Yeah, I've done that before, shooting them from a canoe. That was a bit entertaining.
Good on you.
But,
we need your help.
Yeah, I mean, in Taranaki, there's just thousands of goats,
Yeah, there is.
Everywhere.
And, up the river is, yeah.
Yeah, I shot a wild bull once, not too many years ago, actually, where all that land is that was given to the soldiers after World War I, and then they all walked off the land. It's quite steep country up in there,
By the bridge to nowhere.
Yeah, on that sort of paper road that's there.
Yeah, Mangatapuru, I think, Mangatapuru. Yeah.
Yeah, there's
nobody there. They left. Yeah.
Yeah, there's nobody there, but all their cattle are there, and they're all feral, And,
they're all feral. Yeah.
They are very scary to be around those things. Like, they come for you. They actually hunt. They actually hunt you. So,
you had to shoot it. Basically.
I had to shoot it. It was, when I saw him and I lined him up, he was at about 50 or 60 yards. And when I finally shot him, he was at 19 and coming towards me. So,
okay.
Yeah, it was my mate who was filming it. He said, "Hurry up, Cam, just shoot that thing." So,
yeah. But like a bear,
beautiful country, but there's no way you could farm it.
No, and they should never have really gone up there. It is a beautiful. I'm a Whanganui River girl, born and bred. That's where I hail from. And I just love that area. It's my favourite place on earth.
It's quite peaceful, especially around Jerusalem and places like that. It's just so peaceful. And, that's my happy space, is to be out in the bush or out in nature and living by my wits. And that's when I feel closer to God than anywhere else, doing all of that sort of stuff. So,
people don't understand hunters. And, of course, before falconry, I hunted with guns all the time. Won't so much now. But hunting is maligned and misunderstood by urban people. And it is, to me, it's getting back to nature. You're aware of everything around you. It's life and death for these animals and for us sometimes. But it is a wonderful pastime, and, it feeds us too.
Oh, that's right. I mean, that bull that I shot, we took 2 years to eat the meat out of it. I got over 500 kilos of meat.
Wow.
So, it was magnificent. It was beautiful as well.
Yes. You'll never get that at the supermarket. You never get that at the supermarket, man.
I can't eat meat from the supermarket. All the meat that I eat is meat that I've killed myself. So.
Yeah, that's the way. That's the way. Yeah,
absolutely. It's clean. It's green. It's natural. There's no additives. There's no preservatives. Nothing like that. It's just fantastic food. I
wonder if I could start up a consulting business and or some sort of training business around here and ask the Greens supporters to come on hunting trips with me. I'd like, and do some falconry and come out and kill something in the bush, and let's go and stay out there for a week. Boy, that would be good for them.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how they'd cope with not having their soy lattes, but...
Yeah, but, we'd sort something out for them.
Yeah, give them some baked beans or something like that for breakfast.
Yeah, they'll feel like steak by the end of it. But I'd just like to take some total urban people out and show them what life really is about. This is life. That's real life.
Well, that's the thing in the bush, I mean, I talk about some of the trips that I've had with people where it was really a close thing when I was walking up this track and then I slipped and went into the river. And the margins between life and death when you're in the bush are very, very slim.
Yep.
And if you haven't got your wits about you, then you become a statistic.
Yeah.
And that's what I like about it too, is that you're totally reliant on yourself and your own abilities. Yeah.
I've done a lot in the States, and of course I've done a lot of hunting with friends in the States, and we go to places like Wyoming and Texas and not just falconry, but actually hunting. And, there's always a bear or a rattlesnake to contend with. And part of me really enjoys that, because that just makes me feel exhilarated. I never know what's going to happen, I mean, we've got guns, so we're okay. But there's always something out there that can kill you in the States.
Well, that's right, from taxi drivers on.
Yes, but in New Zealand, the thing that kills you is falling down a bluff and breaking a leg and not being able to get out. No one knows where you are. And so, interesting. It's a closer to God thing. I think you're absolutely right. I couldn't put it in a better way.
Yeah. Well, Rachel, it's been a real pleasure having you on my show this time rather than Paul's show.
Yeah.
And hopefully we'll get you back a few more times.
Yeah, I'd love to. Thank you. Appreciate
it. Maybe we should tee up some TV people to come and film us doing the falconry thing. That'd be funny.
Wouldn't it? People will just hate me even more or like me even better. Who knows? And you.
Yeah, exactly. But I think we could have some fun with that. But I'm certainly going to try and do that in the next year. Well, let's just pencil in somewhere in the next year. We'll try and work it out.
Yeah, for sure. But we'll talk before then. But yes, for sure, definitely. I have access to places up the river you could only dream of.
Oh, fantastic. Awesome. Well, I think we'll have to work on something then.
Yeah, we will.
But once again, thank you for coming on The Crunch. I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, me too. Thanks, Cam.
I really enjoyed talking with Rachel, and I'm especially impressed that she's into falconry. And I'm going to definitely take up her offer to go and visit and learn all about it. Her take on the election was fascinating, from someone who was formerly a Labour Party candidate who now voted New Zealand First. Don't forget to send comments on Rachel's interview to inbox@realitycheck.radio or text to 2057.
You've heard the words open, fair, both sides of the story. It's easy to say them, but practicing them often seems like a bridge too far. New Zealand, it's time for
a reality check. RCR, Reality Check Radio. Rational discussion, common sense, and open debate for real. With me, Paul Brennan.
You know, you just can't make this stuff up. You couldn't write the script.
Veteran broadcaster Peter Williams.
Where is the evidence they actually make a difference? It turns out that was a very fair question to ask.
Taking on the mainstream, Chantel Baker.
Mainstream media, as usual, in their little perch.
The man who cares so much and whose background is for real, Rodney Hyde.
The doctors don't believe them. They can't get ACC. They can't work. They're told it's all in their head.
Along with a raft of contributors to inform, entertain, and bring the truth back to New Zealand media. It's time for a reality check, all right. RCR, Reality Check Radio at www.realitycheck.radio. We've arrived.
You're listening to The Crunch with Cam Slater, right here on RCR, Reality Check Radio.
Now it's time for Cam's Buddies. This week we'll find out what they think of the various campaigns and the results. Who sucked, who won, and who was a bit meh. My producer has them all lined up and ready to go. Let's hear what Cam's Buddies have to say about the election campaign and the results. Welcome to Cam's Buddies, Paul. How are you today?
I'm great, Cam. How are you?
Oh, just recovering from the election, but wasn't that some result on Saturday night?
Well, it was an interesting result, I thought, and I thought many of the folks spoke in speeches that didn't seem to be resonating with what was happening. I don't know if they weren't watching or they weren't reading, but I thought it was pretty interesting, and even more interesting was the things that the leaders of each of the parties were saying.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting that Christopher Luxon came out quite early on and claimed victory, and when his numbers were about 41%, and then progressively over the next several hours dropped back into 38 point something. And I thought it was a little bit presumptuous of him.
Well, I thought that was a little bit presumptuous as well. But I thought the really big one was when the Greens were cheering with like a valedictorian speech where they'd won the whole election. But in fact, they'd probably halved their pay and got kicked out of Parliament, even though they might have got a couple of extra seats, which was an aberration coming from the Labour group, because I imagine next time they will have those folk will go back to Labour like they did away from Labour.
I think you're right on that. The Greens have mistaken the change in vote for them as permanent, but it's really only temporary. And you're probably right. They'll probably lose a couple of those seats that they've won and drop back to a fair few less MPs than what they've got now. But, just saw James Shaw talking about that in the debate before the election, where he was saying that there was going to be all these Green ministers. And I'm sitting there thinking, are you not following the same polls that I'm following?
Well, they might be ministers at a church, but they won't be ministers in our government.
I don't think there's too many
Unless
of them.
Unless he thought that he was going to do a deal with National.
Well, maybe, yeah, you never know. But the numbers don't kind of work for them.
And their policies are diametrically opposed, because one is seriously about giving all the wealthy people's money to someone else. I thought that it was interesting that both David Seymour and Christopher Luxon also looked like their maths wasn't that strong. If there was an overhang of a couple of seats and they got 61 or 62, what did they think? Half of, like they still had a majority of one. Well, when has the government lasted a term without one of its members being sent out to purgatory for some reason?
Well, I mean, that's exactly right. And, I've been talking to a number of people on the Maori side of politics and on the left side of politics, and a few statisticians as well. And they're all saying the same thing, that National's likely to lose at least one seat in the special votes. and the Maori side of politics, they're all very confident they're going to pick up another 2 seats, which will mean there'll be an overhang and a parliament of, say, 123, maybe 124 seats, in which case 61 is, a bit far away for 50%, and they are going to have to reach across the divide and talk to Winston Peters.
Yeah, and I think the Maoris managed to outwit the National and ACT parties almost every time. And they've got some smart people running the show. For example, when they have dual leadership, is that 2 party leader salaries or one party leader salary and an ordinary member of parliament salary split? I'm pretty sure it's 2 leaders of the party salaries, so they get more money by having co-leaders.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
And then I see that with an overhang, you get more people in Parliament. I mean, had this been a closer election and the Greens and Labour been close to the numbers, the overhang of Party Maori could have pushed it over the other way.
That's one thing that Matt McCartan was talking to me about earlier. He said to me that these are permanent changes in the Maori seats. The Labour Party has lost those forever. And at some point in the future, a national-led government or whoever's on the centre-right is going to have to deal with the Maori Party, whether they like it or not, which I thought was an interesting observation.
Yes. And is there a possibility of forming a government, National, ACT, and the Maori Party?
Yeah, not under the current setup. I just don't think Seymour and Luxon are ready for what that entails. But it's certainly something that we need to consider. I mean, Maurice Williamson and I were discussing this exactly with Paul Brennan on the political panel on Monday morning. And it's certainly something that's going to have to be looked at. And I'm not sure that Luxon has got the stones to say, well, do we really need to have Maori electorates anymore?
And Winston, if he took Winston on board, Winston would say that for him in spades, if he would like him to. And it would be a great thing to make sure that one person, one vote is something that comes to being. And because we could make small electorates that were European electorates for wealthy people. And then if we won 10 of those, and that would stack the house the way the Maori Party seems to be doing it on the other side. In that case, I mean, what would I know about that? But when I look at the results, I think it's pretty much how the country seemed to be feeling to me. The polls seemed within 3%, if that's what they're saying the margin was. And every time I've watched the way the party count their votes, National and ACT get a false sense of security for the first half of the evening, and then either big South Auckland parties or somewhere else, the vote is slowly eroded towards the end of the night, and so they lose 2 or 3%. It's happened since I can remember. I mean, there might have been a couple of elections that it didn't happen in, but my uncle told me that when I was a child. It goes this way at the beginning, and then as they count different seats, it will refer back the other way. And I remember thinking 50 years ago, 60 years ago, that's interesting information to have. And yet the National Party leader didn't look like he had that information in his head, nor did many of the broadcasts that were talking about how the parties were going, and they're saying, oh, they're up to 42 now. Well, 42 always looked like 39.
Yeah, well, I was sitting with Winston Peters watching those results come in, and he was laughing, and a couple of his advisors were looking a bit stony-faced, and he said, don't worry about it, watch what happens. Luxon's come out too early, he's got 40-odd% there. By the end of the night, he'll be sitting on 38% or thereabouts, and that's exactly what happened.
Yes, and see, Winston, he knows this stuff. He's been around many elections. He's seen this happen time after time, and as have I. And I was with some folk and we were having dinner and a bit of a watch of the election, and they were all thinking, oh, it's at 42. I said, no, it's still 3 or 4% back from that. wait till the end of the night. And,
well, that's exactly
what
right.
happened.
I mean, that
Now,
is exactly
the real
what's
question
right.
Is,
Go ahead.
the real question is, are they going to negotiate with Winston Peters this side of the count, or are they going to leave it till after the count is finished, and so that then, because if they could throw a few what-ifs to each other, and if this scenario happens, we'll do this, and if this scenario happens, we'll do this, and then they can plan it out, or are they going to see how long they can drag this out? What do you think?
Well, I think it would be wise to wait at least till November the 3rd. It's only, 2 weeks that we have to wait for that. It would be sensible to know what we're actually dealing with, whether there's an overhang, whether there isn't an overhang. It would be a very brave politician that tries to negotiate, given the current numbers on where they're at. And, I think that traditions and history and all of these sorts of things, that people who've been involved in politics for many, many years are aware of, are saying, let's just settle down, wait for the special votes, then we know what we're dealing with, and then we can have some sort of sensible discussion around jobs and policy and the things that are needed to do in a coalition agreement. But I think it's absolutely certain that that National is going to lose one seat, and they'll probably land on about 49, maybe 48 seats. And in which case, the arrogance to suggest that we can cut a deal now when they're going to maybe be in a weaker position is not going to get there.
Yeah, I hear. I think the Greens are going to go a ways to get it. I think they only just got their extra seat, so there has to be a lot of vote to add one to the Greens.
Yeah.
I think they could find that Labor gets another one, which they might be keen on. And I'm not sure how far away New Zealand First is from getting a ninth. Do we know? And do we know who the ninth person is?
They're not far off. The National Party is only 0.2% away from losing a seat. So we will see a change there.
Right.
Yeah. So just a little bit of change, a little bit of a drop, and they lose a seat.
Well, I had an exciting evening on Saturday. I thought, well, this is a pretty good thing. I think one of the things that I was saddened about was Simon O'Connor losing.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I agree with you on that.
He's actually a very good, sound politician, and he happens to be the guy in my electorate. I felt disappointed for that and for him. And for some reason, I think he was 56 on the list. He must have fallen out big time with Christopher Luxon for some reason to have a good somebody of that quality down there. But I mean, I don't run the shop, but I'm just thinking that in my view was a poor move on his part. And also, I think that having attack National like that when they've had the cup of tea deal in the past strikes me as a bit short-sighted. Now, having said that, that ACT candidate looks like she's going to. Everyone seems to love her, and she seems to be a smart girl. But I don't know.
Yeah, the jury's out on that one, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I hear you.
All right, Paul. Thank you very much.
Was in order, and that was good.
Yeah.
Have a good evening. Take care, Cam. We'll talk soon.
Thank you. Hi, Jack. Welcome to Cam's Buddies.
G'day, Cam.
So, interesting night on Saturday night. What's your gut feel on how it all went?
Ho-hum.
Ho-hum.
What's that expression that you used, MEH? How do you pronounce that? May, which I'd never heard of.
Meh.
Or was it a typo?
No, it was a bit meh.
Oh, yeah, exactly. The only one shining light that came out for me was Brooke Van Velden. I think she's a rising star.
Oh, do you?
But as for the rest of them, I do. I could be wrong. I could be totally wrong, but I listened to her on an interview or a debate on one other night, and I found it very impressive. But time will tell. But as for the rest of them, we'll jump from the front. Sorry?
Maybe you and Paul can have a discussion about that, because he's very disappointed in Brooke Van Velden.
Really?
That's all right.
Okay. Well,
it takes
discussion in due course.
It takes all types, though, doesn't it, to make the world go round?
And time will tell. I mean, look, maybe some people thought that Phil Twyford was a good guy too, but look what happened to him. Made all these promises and didn't achieve anything.
No, couldn't build a house if you sat him in a room full of Lego.
But what was even worse was he never did the numbers. I mean, it was an impossible thing that he promised. But there again, the National Party, in my opinion, are promising things that can't happen or won't happen.
No, that's right. And, that's what Winston Peters was saying in my interview with him on Saturday night. He was saying that until we open the books and see what the state of the economy is, all those policies are all moot. So it's not much point in actually sitting down and having a discussion yet about what we're going to achieve until we actually know what we're actually dealing with.
Well, do these people actually go to primary school and do simple arithmetic?
Well, I don't think they have.
I sometimes wonder.
I think that Chris Bishop and Christopher Luxon didn't pull their calculators out until Monday morning and started to realise that, hang on, given the way things go, we're sitting on 0.2% drop in our support, and we'll lose a seat, and we don't have a majority anymore. And then they started to look at the other scenarios where the Maori Party looks like they could pick up a couple of extra seats, and now we've got an overhang situation, and 60 and 61 don't equal half. So they're going to have to talk to Winston Peters, I think.
What amazes me is that if you're going into potentially negotiations with a party or a person or whatever in any state, why would you make disparaging remarks like, I really don't want to do this, but I'm only going to do it if I'm forced into it? I mean, that doesn't bode well for future sort of talks, does it?
No, that's right.
Yet the Luxon just persisted in saying it, and I'm going, what are you doing?
I don't think he knew what he was doing other than just being a negative, negative Nancy boy.
Yeah, well, he's going to have to do it, in my opinion. The sooner he does it, the better.
Well, he's sticking around for now, so he's like the proverbial turd on a blanket.
I think you're right. And as for having Nicola Willis behind him, man, she does not impress me one little bit. Even her own electorate didn't like her.
Yeah, to be fair, I've got a bit of time for Greg O'Connor. And I think he's worked hard as a local MP. But, yeah, I mean, they were pinning their hopes on her being the great saviour for Oharu, and she just didn't come through on that. And that's...
Yeah, you're right.
Greg
O'Connor's a great guy.
Yeah, I mean, I have a private reason why I think that, which I won't share for the listeners, but he showed some compassion in the past, and I'll show compassion to him now. Yeah,
no, he's quite impressive.
Well, thank you for your thoughts, Jack, and we'll talk next week.
Okay, see you later.
Welcome to Cam's Buddies, Jimmy.
G'day, Cam.
So,
you're a happy man.
Did you have a good night on Saturday night?
Yes, it's the latest I've stayed up for a long time. It was fantastic. It's fantastic. What a result.
Yeah.
A blue wave.
Yeah, so you're pleased with the result?
Yeah, I'm really pleased, actually. I think that that Winston getting over the line, ACT getting Tamaki, and National, certainly in Auckland, getting 44% is a great result. It doesn't say much for Jacinda Ardern, considering she had a majority last time, and then the next election this happens. She's
in 1990 when Jim Bolger won in a landslide, there was a 12% shift in swing towards National. This is something like 50% swing against the Labour Party in this election. So they've actually kind of outdone themselves in a spectacular way.
Well, that's another topic. But what's going to happen to Labour with the power and vacuum implosion, right?
Well,
back to the election result.
Yeah,
I think it's fantastic, and I think that I always wanted just a two-party government, either National and New Zealand First or National and ACT, because three-way with politicians' egos is just gonna be difficult. So hopefully we can get there with National and ACT and have Winston shooting them on the crossbenches, keeping them honest, and helping them pass sensible law would be fantastic.
Yeah, I'm not sure Winston would want to be on the crossbenches because you can get a lot more done if you're in government. And if you look at the overlap of policies between New Zealand First Act and National, there's not a lot of difference. And
there's a lot.
No, I don't think there is. I mean, both ACT and New Zealand First want a COVID inquiry. They've got a similar prescription regarding the economy. Obviously, Winston wants to protect superannuitants a little stronger than the others. That's not a bad thing. I think there's more similarities than there are dissimilarities. And it's just the three of them are going to have to sit down and be grown up and deal with it in an adult-like fashion and come up with a policy prescription that we can all accept. And I think if we cut the edges off all of the more extreme stuff of all the parties and end up with somewhere in the middle, that's going to be a good thing, and it probably has a lot more stability than any other possible solution.
Yeah, well, that's true. That's true. So either way, I'm happy with the outcome. I think it's fantastic, and I'm just so thankful for New Zealanders saw that, And what was interesting is some of the media were tweeting that they were surprised and shocked to see this result. They must live in the biggest echo chamber ever. How could you possibly be shocked?
Yeah, well, I think they live in a world where unicorns are flying through the sky, farting rainbows, and they're just so out to lunch and out of touch with New Zealand society that they've lost the ability to be, sensible about what was happening. I mean, you'd have to be blind Freddy to not know there was going to be a change of government.
And the other thing I noted massively is there's a big political difference between Wellington and the rest of New Zealand now.
Oh, absolutely.
Voting in a Green mayor and now the Green Party's got Central Wellington. It's just a massive difference. The people that administer the state are completely different to the people that live in the state.
Yeah, and that's a huge disconnect, and it also shows that the media live in a little adjunct bubble alongside that, where they really don't deal with reality. And, this election, excuse the pun, but Labor and the media got a reality check.
Exactly, and I hope that Lux and Seymour and Winston note that, and it's going to be hard to get the public service to change away from the so-called wokery and into some, actually putting in policy that the government ministers have asked to put in place, Like, how do we force them to actually make these big state institutions filled with bureaucrats who are responsible for administering the state actually do it effectively?
Well, exactly. It's a problem.
Well, you fire all the bosses, like Peter Hughes has quit the Minister of State Services. Is he the Minister of State Services? Sorry, not Minister, boss.
Yeah, he's the head of the State Services Commission, which is, I think, part of the problem.
Change the bosses for a start.
Exactly. But overall, you're pretty happy?
Yeah, I was real happy. I've been feeling different, and then the All Blacks one made it. I had a very good weekend, Cam.
Well, that's right. The All Blacks made it, and it was a close run thing.
So yeah, happy.
It shows what a difference having a national-led government makes. The All Blacks start winning again.
Well, I'll tell you what, the biggest thing I noticed was Luxon's speech on Saturday night was really positive and outward-looking, as opposed to frowny and fawny-faced, telling off sort of Jacinda styles, which we saw last election,
Yeah.
So just straight away it started, just a different attitude at the top, a different leader.
Well, it's just a refreshing. It's just a refreshing change to not be gaslit all the time by a bunch of tyrants.
Yeah, and the other thing was being fantastic was watching Twitter and the woke implode. Then the New Zealanders got the election correct.
Yeah,
it's been fun.
Yeah, there's a bit of vicarious pleasure there.
Yeah. Is it called Schadenfreude?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I've been enjoying it massively, mate.
Yes. Is it wrong of me to have enjoyed it too?
No, do it. It's been fantastic. You're having them gloat for 3 years.
Yeah, I've got a few I told you so's to deliver now. So anyway, we'll see what happens.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Cam.
Thank you. My buddies are awesome. They never let me down, and they always tell me the truth. Tell us who you think was the best of Cam's buddies and why by emailing inbox@realitycheck.radio or text to 2057.
Would you like to be a part of reviving honest media? At RCR, we're on a mission to do just that. We report on critical, censored stories and hold those in positions of power to account. As Paul Brennan says, it's a good mission. Now there's an easy way to support RCR and at the same time receive some amazing benefits. Our Foundation Membership Club is here. As a member, you'll enjoy a host of exclusive benefits, including a daily bite-sized news digest, a backstage pass to RCR, and discounted merchandise. Find out all you need to know about our Foundation membership now at www.realitycheck.radio.
Our text machine is now live. Send us your thoughts by texting your message to 2057. That's 2057. So get in touch with us now.
Right now it's time for one of the favourite parts of my show, the feedback and the mailbag. Let's start with some general feedback. Diane says, great show, Cam. I'm still picking Labour at 21%, listening to politicians, their comments that voters are angry. They will all feel our wrath. NZ first double digits. We'd love to see him be PM. We need adults back in the room. Well, we're a little different on those numbers there, but they are what they are, and the wrath was felt, and we no longer have a Labour Party governing us. Libby says, hey, Cam, just wanted to say, and I'm sure this is not your usual feedback, but loving the music you play on your show, so reflective of our age, interests, and you. Thank you, I love it. Also weird how many people who write to you do so anonymously. About time those people harden up and straight up, in my view. What are they all scared of? They don't know they fear it, and don't they know fear is the thing that controls us and holds us back? Come on, people. We have nothing to be afraid of regarding sharing our views. Not yet, anyway. As for a potential people to have on your show, I dare you to ask Matthew Hooton. Ha! Much respect and kia kaha. Well, Libby, I have asked Matthew, and he's ummed and ahed for a week and then said no and came up with some sort of weak excuse. So maybe you can give him a flea in your ear to come on my show. Anonymous says, hiya, Cam, any chance of Chloe losing Central Auckland? Well, she didn't. I fear a lot of overseas Kiwis will vote Greens since they have a fuzzy idea about them, good for the environment, etc., like they were 25 years ago, from Anonymous. And Gunta says, when I went voting, I passed my orange voting card. The lady used a manual stamp on my card, and then she stamped the top slip on the voting block. This slip had a number, and so did the voting paper she teared off the block. So my vote was actually trackable to my name. I complained. Then she took out a whole roll of self-adhesive black stickers and used one to stick over the number on my voting paper. I rubbed the sticker hard onto the paper. Also, the first vote was for a party, 15 or so listed, while the second vote was for a person, but only 4 people were listed. That doesn't sound right. Well, there was only 4 candidates in your electorate, Gunter, and that's why there was only 4 people listed. The party vote is usually alongside that candidate, and then all the others flow through. Now, about my monologue, Cam's monologue. Well said, bring it on, from Lisa Berry. And on my interview with Kane Warren from Vision New Zealand. Hi, Cam. I used to work with high-level youth offenders in Manukau. We took them to Kane's gym. I'm not religious, but he is a very nice, genuine guy. And Lisbeth says, hello, RCR. Cam's interview with Man Up, fantastic. Gives me hope for the future for all the families ripped apart by violence. These men and women have had traumatic childhoods, and for them to break the cycle is the best thing to do for future generations. We got a Facebook comment about that too. God bless Cain, and I agree. Regarding Cam's buddies, hi Cam, you've asked for our feedback on which buddy fared the best in tonight's Cam's buddies. I placed my vote on the last buddy whose name I cannot remember. Apologies for this. Great program tonight. Shelley, that was Miles, was the last person in the Cam's buddies that week. Kim says to Cam, Miles by a mile, because he understands the freedom vote and what Brian is about. And we've got some additional comments about Winston Peters' interview and other New Zealand First related comments. Anonymous says, we loved hearing Winston talking with Cam Slater. Honesty and common sense, not much around in the New Zealand political world. Always an interesting history lesson and political insight with these two titans. Anonymous says, there's a lot of things that were done under Winston's party. He assisted in the euthanasia bill and was for extreme abortion rights and for mandated vaccines until just recently changing his stance. Can he be trusted? Well, Anonymous, I think he can be trusted to listen to people and then be willing to change his mind when he's shown to be wrong. And I think that's an admirable quality for a politician to have. Bobby says, Cam, I still have hopes on New Zealand First getting 24% of the vote. I'm a realist. Chris says, hi Cam, great show as usual. I'm a little worried about voting for Winston, but we have to put our faith in him to do as he says. We'd love to see the other freedom parties join New Zealand First as they have some great candidates. National Labour, ACT, Maori and the Greens will never, ever get my vote. Anonymous says, MSN hate the truth. The more the media hate New Zealand First, the more I love them. Big backfire on them. Hamish says, hi Cam, thanks so much for your great analysis of this election. While you've annoyed me immensely, your facts and clear explanations have been invaluable. We will now be voting New Zealand First. The minor freedom parties will have to be more organised next time. We highly value your contribution to RCR and New Zealand. Another anonymous comment, I've just listened to Cam Slater's interview with Winston Peters on unwinding legislation and his proposed Royal Commission into media bias. A fantastic interview, and Winston Peters' comeback is our country's hope for the forgotten New Zealanders. Thanks, RCR, for standing up for New Zealand. Shalom. Jeff says, do you think Winston will get a seat at the table, be required to form a government? If not, what a shame that New Zealanders are still so stupid given the political landscape globally to expect change after voting for Nats and ACT. New Zealand will get absolutely no change. In fact, slavery could worsen on their watch. As leaders, they have the moral fibre of a gnat fly and probably less, and will only serve to obey orders to further weaken the West. Why can people not see it for what it is and vote accordingly when they had the chance? Just sheer stupidity. Thanks for your work and those RCR people that are trying desperately to educate and wake people up to the fact they are currently part of a strong global depopulation agenda. And finally, from Kylie, could you give us a breakdown on what the result of 8 New Zealand First members means? What does this translate to in terms of who we have in our corner that made it to Parliament? As it is disappointing that so many amazing people like Erica, Kirsten and Lee didn't make it this time, I would, and I'm sure many of your listeners would, love to know who is in those 8 seats and what might they be able to bring to the table. I understand you've already interviewed some of them, and I'm just wondering if you're able to give us some history on all 8 and what we may see from them as a party and individuals. Thanks again. You're all amazing. Love listening to you all. Thanks for your election night commentary. It was a lifesaver. I only watched TV3 for a short while once you finished and was appalled by how terribly out of touch, uninformed and biased they continue to be, and how much laughter and hilarity there was in such a serious election round. It was truly excruciating to watch. Well, Kylie, I have interviewed Shane Jones and Winston Peters and Tanya Unkovich. I need to do some research on the others, but maybe I'll touch on that in coming shows. And that's the mailbag for this week.
This is The Crunch with Cam Slater. Conversations with a side of controversy, right here on RCR.
Right, that's it for The Crunch this week. The election campaign is done, And we now have had a bit of a post-mortem on the results. With 20% of the vote still to be counted, expect some changes. But we changed the government and we sent the tyrants packing. And that's great news. But we need to stay focused. We need to ensure we all don't go to sleep again. The anger that was shown in the vote needs to be harnessed so that we can rebuild this divided and shattered nation. We must have a proper inquiry into what happened over the past few years. It's important after the division, the segregation, and the demonisation. And that's why we are here at Reality Check Radio to give you all sides of any story or issue, and it is a job we all love doing. If you're using the RCR app, and you really should be, you can easily get all our replays as well as listen live. Here at RCR, we conducted over 200 interviews relating to local, national, and international politics, including over 150 concerning our general election. And in keeping with our philosophy, we've provided information and insights to you, our audience, so that you were able to weigh up your options and make your own educated voting decisions last Saturday. And a big thanks for the team that put together our election night coverage. It is true that many hands make light work, and I believe that our coverage surpassed the abilities of TVNZ and News Hub. It's been a real pleasure having you all back this week. I'm loving all your feedback and really enjoying talking to so many people sharing their thoughts on politics, life, and everything in between, including falconry. The campaign is over, but politics is like rust. It never sleeps. So here at The Crunch, we will continue holding politicians' feet to the fire and asking them the hard questions. So a big shout out to all of you, and thank you for listening and having faith in me as we continue to explore this beautiful game of politics. Don't forget, email suggestions to inbox@realitycheckradio for people for me to interview, and let's make this show the best political show in New Zealand. Stay tuned for a breakfast show repeat coming up next with features including Money Talks with my Badi, Farzan Irani, and Perigo's Perspective with the one and only Lindsay Perigo. Looking forward to having you join me again next Thursday at 4 p.m. for The Crunch with Cam Slater.
You've been listening to The Crunch with Cam Slater. Remember, you can check out the replays for today's show on our website at www.realitycheck.radio/replays. Tune in every Thursday at 4 p.m. for more with Cam Slater, right here on RCR, Reality Check Radio.